becoming infinitely stronger starting from Marvel. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in the saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 101: Break All Three Legs. Hey, I don't agree with what you said. Seeing that Bai Ye and Victor had already decided on the candidate, astronaut Johnny immediately stood up, dissatisfied. Ben, he was originally going to be one of us. He can't just leave because of your words. Johnny, don't be impulsive. Victor quickly grabbed the future thunderbolt, not wanting to ruin the deal. He had even sacrificed his fiancée for this deal. He couldn't let it fall apart because of this. Bai Ye, who was originally planning to leave after watching, looked at Johnny and said, "Do you have any objections?" "What objections do I have?" "Because you, a mediocre person who got in through connections, casually dismissed such an excellent astronaut as Ben with a single sentence. Do you think that's appropriate?" Johnny shook off Victor's hand, stepped forward, and looked directly at Bai Ye. Looking at the big guy in front of him, Bai Ye thought for a moment and said, "Your name is Johnny Storm, right?" "That's right." Johnny had a nonchalant expression, hands in his pockets. "If what you just said was serious, then to be honest, you really have a talent for comedy," Bai Ye said. "What do you mean? A year ago, you sneaked into the flight simulator with two Victoria's Secret lingerie models, causing it to crash and getting you kicked out of the space agency. Given your dedication and past experience, I find it hard to imagine how you got into this project without your genetics director's sister saying I got in through connections. What, the flight simulator isn't enough for you? Are you planning to smash up a space station this time?" Bai Ye said calmly. Under Victor's shocked gaze of "I can't believe it," Johnny became increasingly guilty, while Susan's face showed an embarrassed expression. "That's enough, no need to say any more." Seeing Johnny's embarrassment, Ben stepped forward and said, "I'll leave." Seeing Ben's moved expression at Johnny's righteousness, Bai Ye thought for a moment and smiled with pleasure at Johnny, saying, "Since you insist on letting Ben go to the space station as well, then I take back what I said earlier. Ben's spaceflight quota is still valid, and you can go up together." So easily changed his mind. Everyone else was somewhat surprised, but then, remembering that Johnny was Susan's brother, it made perfect sense. Only Bai Ye smiled slightly at the relieved couple. Since they were determined to go their own way, he wouldn't interfere. He just hoped that Ben, now a stone man and having lost his fiancée, would be more at peace when he saw Johnny with his newfound powers. That's settled then. Ben, Susan, Johnny, and Mr. Bai will all go to the space station together. I'll wait for news on the ground, Victor said, relieved that nothing serious had happened. But then, Bai Ye turned his head slightly in confusion, because hundreds of meters away, he could hear a constant stream of insults. "Mutants, get down here, inferior people, die, demon Bai Ye, get out of this world, dot." At that moment, hundreds of meters away, a procession of about 200 people was chanting insults as they marched towards the Doom Group. Along the way, their imposing presence attracted many onlookers. The reporters who had originally planned to film Bai Ye were now excitedly taking pictures of the march. Most of these people were Western rednecks who hated mutants. Especially after learning that they would be forced to pay taxes to Bai Ye because of his everyone has to practice martial arts scheme. Their mentality had completely exploded. Knowing that Bai Ye wanted to visit the Doom Corporation today, they immediately organized a march to protest against him and demand he rescind his tax collection decision. Soon, the huge commotion reached the company staff. Victor's expression changed slightly. He hadn't expected so much trouble today. A few people went to the 7th floor balcony and looked down, finding that the marchers had surrounded the company. The sheer number of hundreds was overwhelming, making it difficult for the security guards to maintain order. Looking down at the rioting crowd, Bai Ye laughed. "It's only been 2 days, and the online sentiment has changed so quickly. It's not your problem, it's just the current public opinion environment regarding mutants," Kingpin said, sweating slightly, afraid that Bai Ye would lose his temper. Victor, trying to smooth things over, said, "Please don't take their words to heart. Please wait a moment inside the company, We'll handle it, it's alright. This is the first time I've encountered something like this. It's quite amusing. Let them hold it up a little longer, Bai Ye said, leaning against the edge of the balcony, looking down at the marching crowd. These people were holding up posters of Bai Ye, their faces covered in various spoof images. That mutant freak is over there, someone with sharp eyes shouted, pointing at Bai Ye on the 7th floor balcony. Then, a barrage of insults erupted, directed at Bai Ye on the 7th floor. Some even considered throwing rotten eggs, but the 20-meter height was too much to bear. Victor and Kingpin watched Bai Ye nervously, afraid he would get angry, while Johnny and the others watched with amusement, waiting to see how he would handle the situation. On the balcony, Bai Ye scrutinized each person's face. He recognized some of them as the same people who had excitedly chanted his name and supported him at the press conference. But now, they've joined the march, hurling insults at him relentlessly. Mutant freak, get down here, bastard, withdraw the tax bill, get down here, dot. Seeing the agitated scene below, Bai Ye gently tapped the edge of the balcony and said, Kingpin, I remember what your main job is again. I'm the chairman of Value Line Corporation, currently, Kingpin answered hesitantly, but was interrupted by Bai Ye a second later. Is that what I meant? Bai Ye said calmly, you haven't forgotten your roots because you've done too much legitimate business, have you? Don't these people know I know Kung Fu? Bai Ye looked down at the people below and said, have they always been this brave? You mean? Kingpin said cautiously. Now, call a group of people and break their legs. 2, break 3, Bai Ye said with complete ease. As he spoke, Bai Ye even took out his phone, switched to wide-angle mode, and took a panoramic photo of the people below. Kingpin paused, then whispered, when? Now, of course. Are you expecting them to drag their good leg through Christmas? Kingpin hesitated. Even he wouldn't dare do such a thing in front of everyone. Or, you could break 3 legs for them, Bai Ye said slowly, startling Kingpin into quickly replying, you're right, I'll arrange for someone to do it right away. Remember to be careful whoever does it, don't give them a chance to get compensation, Bai Ye said with utmost kindness. Chapter 102 Equality for All. What did he just say? He wanted to break all the legs of the people marching down there. Cold sweat streamed down Susan and the others' foreheads and backs. Victor forced a smile and looked at Bai Ye, saying, You must be joking, right? Bai Ye didn't answer, but Kingpin's men beside him had already instinctively pulled out their phones. Beep beep beep, with a ring, the phone was immediately answered. Kingpin's subordinate coldly ordered, right now, call 5, no, 10 thugs to the Doom Corporation gate and break 3 legs of everyone participating in the protest. Yes, you mean 3 legs, number of people? Over 200. Break them all. This is what the boss's boss ordered. Also, remember to clear out all the thugs' assets. Put them straight to jail. Why? The boss's boss said not a single penny can be left to compensate the protesters. That's right, just tell them that the boss will pay for the jail. Even if they want to hire prostitutes in there, we can send them in, the boss will take care of their families. After they've been in there for 5 or 10 years, I'll get them out. Behind him, Susan and the others were stunned. These people, who had never dealt with the underworld before, simply couldn't imagine Kingpin's actions. There are over 200 people marching below. Breaking their legs would cause a huge social uproar. Is this guy joking? In fact, not only the legitimate world, but even the underworld wouldn't dare to do something so openly, afraid the authorities wouldn't notice. Even knowing it's incredibly suicidal, Kingpin still chose to bet with Bai Ye, all in. At this moment, facing the astonished and incredulous expressions of the crowd, Bai Ye and Kingpin remained completely indifferent, looking down at the crowd without saying a word. I should try to appease them, Bai Ye suddenly said after a moment's thought. Huh? Why? Kingpin was stunned. Such a quick change? You're not going to break their legs? Victor and the others breathed a sigh of relief. It's best not to act you if possible, the underworld is truly terrifying. No, it's just that your men might have arrived too late. I was afraid these protesters would disperse early if they realized I wasn't reacting, so I had to keep them a little longer, Bai Ye said seriously. Just relying on anger without any outlet is like firing at an empty shell. This group won't last long. There needs to be external influence and fermentation for them to continue. Just consider it a way to taunt and draw in the monsters, Bai Ye thought. Hiss, even Kingpin gasped upon hearing Bai Ye's words. This was practically a living devil. Yanjin, you're so meticulous, Kingpin flattered, giving a thumbs up. Bai Ye ignored Kingpin's words and looked at Victor. Do you have a microphone or something here? I want to speak to the crowd. Victor shuddered at Bai Ye's gaze and quickly replied, yes, I do. What? A microphone? I have one. I'll get it right away. After saying that, Victor practically ran to get the microphone for Bai Ye, just so he could leave Bai Ye for a few seconds. Susan and the others felt their legs trembling. They wanted to leave but dared not speak, afraid of attracting Bai Ye's attention, and could only stand aside like they were being punished. Johnny, in particular, wished he could go back a few minutes and slap himself. Of all people to mess with, he had to mess with him. A minute later, a panting Victor ran up with a microphone in his hand and handed it to Bai Ye, saying, it's connected to the company's broadcast system. Just press the red button on the microphone to speak to the people below. They can definitely hear you clearly. Oh, thank you, Bai Ye said with a smile after taking it. Victor forced a smile and waved his hand, saying, it was nothing at all. He realized that Bai Ye and Kingpin's open conspiracy in front of them wasn't because they didn't consider them outsiders, but rather because they were as indifferent as insects that could be crushed with a stomp. If they dared to report or obstruct them, they would be the ones with 3 legs broken next. Did they see how Kingpin was scolded by Bai Ye just for asking a question? Ben, having regained his astronaut status, was filled with mixed emotions. It seemed that Bai Ye's decision to keep him away from the job was indeed a good thing. Otherwise, who knew when a single word might offend him and lead to disability? Bai Ye held the microphone, pressed the start button, and a buzzing sound came from the company's loudspeaker. At that moment, footage of the protest below was being urgently broadcast to major news stations via reporters' cameras. In Utopia, the mutants watched with righteous indignation as the images of Bai Ye being denounced as a mutant, especially those mutants from the academy whom Bai Ye had rescued. Professor X lamented that prejudice in the human heart was a mountain, while Magneto gripped his steel ball tightly, wishing he could be there and cause a bloodbath. During the school's lunch break, Gwen, seeing her classmates gathered around looking at their phones, curiously approached. She saw the figure who had sent her back and hadn't contacted her since, depicted in various parodies and pasted on the protesters' posters. This is too much, Gwen, who had been full of resentment towards Bai Ye, blurted out instinctively. Meanwhile, in the factory where Bai Ye was training, Rogue and Smith were watching the parade through an emergency news broadcast on television. Can you hear that, you idiots? Just then, Bai Ye's voice rang out over the loudspeaker, clearly audible in the live broadcast. What's he saying? The marchers were stunned. Was this guy still so arrogant even after being denounced? That's right, I'm Bai Ye, a mutant, and the target of your parade. Bai Ye smiled at the crowd below. You've got quite a few people here today. Oh, let me see. White pig, Niger, and even yellow monkey. Wow, quite a diverse range of species. Are there any mutant freaks here for today's parade too? The marchers at the scene. The mutants watching the live broadcast. Gwen, Rogue, and Smith? Those who heard Bai Ye's voice were stunned. This was too sarcastic, and it included everything. What was this? If you discriminate against all races equally, is that a different kind of equality? Damn it, fake, sour radish bitch. Below, after a few seconds of stunned silence, emotions exploded instantly. Because of Bai Ye's words, everyone who was about to leave stayed behind and started doing oral gymnastics to Bai Ye. Chapter 103. I'll give you all 1 minute. Brilliant, the people behind Bai Ye were already drenched in sweat. Bai Ye's ability to attract attention was simply too strong. With just a few words, he had completely offended everyone below. If the company gates hadn't been forcibly closed and locked, and if the security guards maintaining order hadn't been desperately holding them back, these people would probably have stormed into the company premises. You miscellaneous creatures below, I know you're angry, but I can look down on you from above and curse you all, while you can only rage helplessly. Aren't you angry? Bai Ye raised an eyebrow and smiled smugly, his handsome appearance able to evoke the deepest anger in people's hearts. At the same time, among the special groups watching the news broadcast, deaf, so handsome, the person on the news must be very polite. Blind, this must be a very despicable person. Mute. Meanwhile, Bai Ye watched the crowd below still attacking the air. I know you're all angry with me, thinking there shouldn't be a book tax, and want me to withdraw it. I hereby formally declare that this is absolutely impossible. Now, not only am I going to scold you, but in a few days, After the bill passes, I'll be lying at home watching $15 flow into my bank account, a sum that might not even exceed the PIN number on each of your cards. Thinking about that, are you even angrier? Bai Ye smiled at the crowd below, using words to fuel their anger. By the way, after the $15 tax is collected, I have a new book to publish, Everyone Has Skill 2.0. My second book will be sold on a pre-sale basis, that is, I'll first withdraw money from your bank accounts, and only release the book after I've collected enough, and the tax amount for the next book depends on you. Bai Ye laughed, looking at the crowd. What do you mean, there's a second book? What do you mean the tax amount depends on them? At this moment, everyone, from the marching crowd to the people behind Bai Ye, and even those watching the news broadcast, quieted down, eager to understand the details. Alright, listen up, you bunch of trash. Once my second book is published, I will set new tax rates based on your behavior, Bai Ye announced to the crowd. Everyone who slanders me behind my back or to others will be taxed, those who insult me online will be taxed even more, those who insult me in ICA will be taxed even more severely. Everyone was stunned again, this was too arrogant. Immediately, someone stood up and shouted, "Fuck you, you sour radish bitch. You're acting like a dictator. I'm not only against the tax on your second book, but you won't get any tax on your first either. Those who oppose my tax increase will also be taxed," Bai Ye said calmly. For the next book, the starting price is $100 per person. If you don't want to pay, then the second book won't be released. Anyway, I'm not short of money. By the time I live to 300 years old using the power of the second book, the grass on your graves will probably be a meter high. Isn't that a bit too much? Gwen muttered to herself while watching the live stream. Previously, she was referring to the protesters, but now she was mainly referring to Bai Ye. How could I have imagined that this bad guy would suffer a loss? His personality is such that he can't stand being taken advantage of at all, Gwen thought to herself. On the mutant island, everyone watching TV cheered. No mutant had ever been so tough on humans before. Bai Ye was practically their racial hero. That's it, let's fight them. Magneto was as excited as a 60 or 70-year-old child, but little did he know that Bai Ye was really going to fight soon. At this moment, the crowd below was already in a frenzy, each one looking down at Bai Ye from the building with fury, their neck pain almost cured. Just then, Kingpin walked up and whispered, "Mr. Bai, our people are almost here." Bai Ye nodded slightly, looking at the crowd below who hadn't left, and suddenly felt a surge of kindness, saying, "To avoid endless tax increases, I'll give you 1 minute. Those who choose to stay will face even heavier taxes, so those who want to leave should hurry up." But by now, the crowd below had been stirred up by Bai Ye, and even though he was now making an exception, few people left. In fact, because of Bai Ye's taunts, the number of protesters increased to over 300. Bai Ye didn't force them, smiling as he picked out a song from his phone, pressed play, and held the microphone close to the phone, letting the song slowly play from the loudspeaker. The next moment, everyone heard a slightly upbeat song coming from the loudspeaker, and Bai Ye quietly left his phone and loudspeaker on the balcony, waiting patiently. Soon, about 40 seconds later, a van slowly pulled up outside the crowd, and 10 men with unremarkable appearances and builds got out. The others in the march merely glanced at them before turning their heads away, assuming they were also protesters joining the crowd. Bai Ye, however, smiled and gave them a final word of advice, "Time's almost up, 10, 9, 8, the crowd below didn't move, instead looking at Bai Ye on the balcony with mocking eyes. Who is afraid? Seeing this, Bai Ye calmly finished counting the last few numbers, 3, 2, Bai Ye didn't say 1, but instead turned and left. Then, amidst the slightly upbeat background music, a scream suddenly rang out. Everyone looked over to see a man clutching his leg, lying on the ground, both legs visibly twisted, howling in pain. Soon after, a series of cracking sounds of bones breaking echoed, and as the crowd shifted, rows of people fell, screaming like shredded chives. Crack! 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 The sounds of bones breaking, screams, and upbeat music mingled together, sounding comical at this moment. To the shocked, horrified, and even terrified viewers watching the live stream, this scene unfolded starkly. Bai Ye leisurely approached Johnny, helplessly spreading his hands and saying, "See? I told you to hurry up and leave, but you wouldn't listen." Honestly, Johnny was trembling with fear, terrified of Bai Ye's ruthlessness, afraid he'd collapse and kneel before him. You're right. Chapter 104 I don't want to see him. Below the Doom Group headquarters, figures surged. 10 men, brimming with profound inner strength, weaved through the crowd like shuttles, causing 20 or 30 people to collapse every second, their faces contorted in agony. Some tried to escape, but before they could even take a step, they fell to the ground, trembling with pain and howling incessantly. This blatant violence unfolded right before the eyes of countless viewers on the news broadcast. On the 7th floor, Bai Ye listened to the screams below, his expression tense for a moment before he finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Awesome, he lightly waved his arm, a slight smirk playing on his lips, and looked at Kingpin, saying, "Remember to clean up the mess quickly." "And I remember they were just parading around with my grotesque image, weren't they?" Yes, Mr. Bai," Kingpin nodded. "That's an insult to my reputation. Remember to have a lawyer send each of them a letter, demanding additional compensation for emotional distress," Bai Ye said with a slight smile. "Remember, whatever you do, don't let them have an easy time in the hospital." Ruthless. Too ruthless. Susan and the others felt a chill run down their spines. Not only were 3 of their legs broken, but they weren't even given a penny in compensation. Not only were they not given compensation, but they were also being forced to pay for emotional distress. Seeing Bai Ye, even Satan in hell would have to admit defeat. As they spoke, thanks to the efficiency of the thugs below, the screams quickly stopped. More than 300 people were writhing on the ground in agony. The pain of having 3 legs broken was simply unbearable. Oh, right, some of the protesters were female, so they were lucky enough to only have 2 legs broken. After dealing with these people, the 10 thugs didn't flee. They stood motionless in full view of everyone. "Do you know what you're doing?" At that moment, the doors of the Doom Company slowly opened, and Bai Ye walked out, demanding righteously, "This is intentional assault. Why did you do this? We're your die-hard fans, and we were so angry that we spontaneously organized ourselves," one of the thugs replied, repeating his previous statement. "Oh, so you're my fans? Well, you'd better watch yourselves in prison and remember to obey the law," Bai Ye waved casually. Then, the police arrived belatedly in their patrol cars. "Everyone, don't move. Hands up," a policeman shouted as he got out of the car, then instinctively cursed at the groaning crowd lying on the ground. Wang Difa, the scene before him was simply too shocking. Without the policeman even lifting a finger, the 10 thugs had already raised their hands and willingly stepped forward to be handcuffed. As for Bai Ye and Kingpin, what did this have to do with them? Soon, due to the escalating situation, a large number of ambulances and police cars surrounded the area. Before the protesters with broken legs were carried onto the ambulances on stretchers, they all glared at Bai Ye with venomous eyes. Everyone knew it was Bai Ye who did it, but there was no evidence. "Officer, those people all confessed. They're my die-hard fans. Before today, they had nothing to do with me. I didn't even know their names." "Don't generalize fan behavior to idols." Bai Ye spread his hands, looked at the sheriff in front of him, and blinked innocently, saying, "You can't possibly detain me, can you?" "You're right. You are highly suspected of involvement in this case. I strongly suspect you are the mastermind. Now, come with us," the lead policeman said angrily, holding handcuffs. "But my time is precious. Please be lenient." "You won't find anything anyway," Bai Ye argued. "Yes, officer, I am the chairman of the Doom Group. I can vouch for Mr. Bai. He has absolutely no connection to this matter." Victor stepped forward to support him. "Mutant freak," the sheriff uttered the word in an extremely low voice, then said with a look of disgust and sternness, "I have the right to detain you. Now come with me to the station." "Excuse me, you just used a word that bothered me. Could you say it again?" At this moment, Bai Ye revealed a dangerous smile. "Just come with me to the station, Mr. Bai." The sheriff didn't answer Bai Ye's question, but simply shook the handcuffs in his hand. The next moment, he saw Bai Ye's head turn to the side. "What's this guy doing?" The sheriff looked at Bai Ye's head turning and then squatting down, puzzled. But only Kingpin, standing to the side, knew that Bai Ye meant, "I don't want to see this person." The next moment, one of the thugs, who had been handcuffed, roared, "Dare to mess with my idol? Take this." He then shoved aside several officers, delivering a flying kick that knocked the police chief to the ground. Under the tense gazes of the surrounding officers, he then relentlessly punched the chief in the face, knocking him unconscious. "What are you doing? Stop it," a nearby officer cried out, rushing forward to pull the man away. Once separated, they saw the police chief, his face covered in blood, barely breathing. I told you, no fighting, it's not a good look." After everything was over, Bai Ye stood up and looked at the man, saying, "Look at the police chief you've beaten, even his own mother wouldn't recognize him. Go to jail and reform yourself." The man bowed his head and said, "Mr. Bai's right," before obediently being handcuffed and taken away by the police. Sir, Bai Ye smiled at another officer beside him, raising his hands and offering them to him. The sergeant was right, I should also obey the law. Arrest me too. The somewhat young officer nodded subconsciously. But the next moment, he noticed that the handcuffed criminals had all turned to look at him with calm eyes, the meaning of which was self-evident. No need, the officer said, frightened, waving his hands repeatedly. No need? Fine, you said it yourself. Bai Ye sighed regretfully, lowering his hands. The other onlookers thought indignantly, too arrogant, but even with their resentment, the surrounding police subconsciously ignored Bai Ye, pretending he didn't exist. What if he squatted down, acting like a victim, and then a fanatical fan jumped out and killed them all? At this moment, they faced Bai Ye, who had power, money, and authority. Faced with absolute violence, they were utterly powerless against him. Chapter 105 Reversing the Heavenly Gang. By the way, with something this big happening, why isn't Chief George here? Bai Ye asked a police officer curiously. The officer explained somewhat fearfully, the chief hasn't been feeling well lately, so he's taken a week off. Bai Ye nodded understandingly. A rest was good, otherwise, running into him would be rather awkward. Watching the busy police officers and medical personnel, Bai Ye looked at Victor. Remember to let me know before the space station launches. Kingpin will transfer the money to your account tomorrow. Yes, Victor nodded repeatedly. Don't worry, I'll arrange everything properly. But would you like us to send someone to teach you some space knowledge? After all, space is different from Earth. There might be some problems. Bai Ye pointed at Kingpin indifferently. I don't have time to come here to learn. Just send me all the space-related materials later. You can talk to Wilson about that. With that, Bai Ye calmly turned around and disappeared into the crowd amidst the raging wind. At this moment, after Bai Ye left, Kingpin approached and politely said to Victor, "It's a bit noisy here. I'd like to speak with you privately." Victor readily agreed and, together with Kingpin, avoided the surrounding crowd to a corner. Victor, Mr. Wilson, are you referring to the space data? Don't worry, as long as you provide Mr. Bai's address, we'll mail the relevant materials immediately. No, I think simply reading study materials is too inefficient. For Mr. Bai's safety in outer space, we need to send a teacher specializing in space knowledge to instruct him. Kingpin's short sentence startled Victor. After a moment's thought, he said, "So, Mr. Wilson, what do you mean? The person who instructs Mr. Bai should ideally be chosen from among those in space. After all, they are Mr. Bai's future partners, and since they can work in space, no one will doubt their knowledge of space-related fields. So, Mr. Wilson, who do you want to choose?" Victor realized what Kingpin meant. Johnny and Mr. Bai Ye have had a conflict. Wouldn't it be inappropriate for him to teach Mr. Bai? Kingpin didn't directly point out the reason but used the process of elimination. No, absolutely not. This person wasn't originally chosen by Mr. Bai, although he later changed his mind. But if we were to meet and teach him, it would be awkward. It wouldn't be appropriate for him to come. That's even more inappropriate. Victor refused outright. In that case, only one candidate remains. There are no better options. Kingpin sighed. Mr. Wilson, Susan is my fiancée. It wouldn't be appropriate for her to come directly to teach him, Victor said, glancing back at the oblivious Susan. No wonder he wanted to speak privately. This wasn't a proper tutor. Don't worry, Mr. Bai's a gentleman, and this is all for his safety, Kingpin said solemnly. Safety first. For Mr. Bai's safety, I'll personally add another 1 billion to the budget. For deeper cooperation in the future, you must do me the favor. 1 billion. Victor took a deep breath, feeling the green tips of his hair, and said with a tense expression, "All right, it's just a learning exchange. I personally have complete faith in Mr. Bai's character, then, please cooperate." Kingpin smiled and extended his large, fan-like hand. "Pleasure cooperate." Victor smiled at the right moment and shook Kingpin's hand. Late at night, Beth lay on his bed in utter misery. Feeling his numb lower body after being anesthetized, his anger uncontrollable. As a member of the protest, his 3 legs had naturally been completely broken by the thugs. But at this moment, Besides anger, he also felt a deep regret, wondering why he had gotten involved in the protest. "What did you say? Is that even human language?" "I absolutely disagree." At this moment, a huge commotion suddenly erupted outside the ward, as if someone was arguing. What happened? Beth wondered, but then saw the ward door pushed open, and a doctor and a well-dressed man walked in. "Doctor, how am I feeling?" Beth asked hopefully when he saw the doctor enter. The doctor hesitated for a moment before saying, "If the surgery goes smoothly, your legs can recover to the point where you can walk normally, but the chances of healing your ruptured flesh are slim." Hearing that he would never be able to have sex again, Beth froze on the spot, but then he heard the doctor continue, "However, it's not entirely hopeless." "Really?" "Doctor," Beth's hope rekindled. "Yes, if you cultivate your internal energy to a certain level, your legs have a chance to be completely healed, but the severed flesh cannot be regrown with internal energy at present. However, you can wait for everyone has skill 2.0 a month later. The upgraded version might be possible," the doctor said, but Beth's face was completely numb. It was Bai Ye who ordered the attack, and now he had to wait for the 2.0 version of internal energy to recover. Thinking of Bai Ye's declaration of constantly increasing taxes at noon, Beth felt a lump of anger stuck in his chest, difficult to vent. By the way, the money you prepaid at the hospital isn't enough. "I'm here to inform you," the doctor said somewhat awkwardly. "Why should I pay? Those people beat me up. They should be the ones to compensate me," Bate argued. "We've spoken with the police about that," the doctor said. "But after the investigation, those who did the beating have no assets whatsoever, and they owe millions in debt. They simply can't afford to pay. At most, they'll just get a few more years in prison." "What about Bai Ye? He's the one who instigated the beating. He can't possibly be broke too, can he?" Bate's emotions were starting to crumble. "The police said there's no evidence that Bai Ye instigated them, so theoretically, Bai Ye has no liability whatsoever," the doctor said slowly. Fuck. Hearing the doctor's words, Bate completely lost control of his emotions, cursing and pounding the sheets with his fists. But before he could vent for long, a calm voice sounded from the side. "Mr. Bate, are you? We are lawyers from Value Line Corporation. We're here to discuss compensation with you." "Value Line Corporation?" Bate stopped roaring, remembering that Value Line Company seemed to be the kind of company that offered training to everyone. So, was this guy sent by Bai Ye to pay compensation? "Compensation? How much can you pay?" Bate sneered. "If you don't satisfy me, just wait and see how this goes." "Mr. Bate, are you misunderstanding something?" The man in the suit adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. "You should be compensating Mr. Bai." "What do you mean?" Bate asked incredulously, a sense of foreboding creeping in. "Your defamation of Mr. Bai has caused him serious emotional distress. Now, on behalf of Mr. Bai, I am formally issuing you a lawyer's letter," the lawyer confidently stated. "As for the amount of compensation, we are a professional legal team, and we will absolutely satisfy Mr. Bai. So, that mutant bastard named Bai Ye not only had me beaten up, but he also wants me to pay him compensation." Bate almost laughed at the sheer absurdity. Chapter 106 Boosting Hospital Performance. No, sir, you're mistaken," the lawyer smiled. "Don't forget that if the tax bill passes, you'll also have to pay an additional book tax." "Fuck you, you and that mutant beast Bai Ye." "I fuck you," the patient roared. "If you don't want to pay more compensation, watch your language." This statement clearly shows that you have extreme discrimination and malice towards Mr. Bai and me. The lawyer wasn't angry at all, but smiled and said, "I've recorded everything you just said. If I'm willing, you also need to compensate me for emotional distress. Consider it extra money." After saying that, the lawyer turned his head in fright, because of this on the other person's bedside table had already smashed over. Bang! With a crisp sound of shattering, the lawyer left after saying that, leaving only Beth standing there sulking. "I'm telling you, this isn't over. I'm going to fight you to the end, make you bankrupt, and make that bastard Bai Ye get the fate he deserves," Beth roared. Outside the ward, the lawyer, pale-faced, said, "Boss, this absolutely needs a raise. It's too dangerous." Standing before the lawyer was a 2-meter-tall, burly man with gray skin, his body as hard as a rhinoceros's. It was none other than Tombstone, Kingpin's top henchman. "You'll get what you're owed." "What did the people inside say?" Tombstone asked. He cursed Mr. White again," the lawyer nodded. "Then add him to the list too." Talk to everyone, then break those cursing hands again later. Damn it, they never learn. Doubling my workload, Tombstone cursed. Late at night, Bait heard screams coming from the next ward, followed by the hospital's alarms going off everywhere. What happened? Bait thought fearfully, then saw his ward door pushed open, and a blood-stained man walked in. Bait, right? Why don't you guys learn your lesson? The blood-stained man complained. Who are you? What do you want? Bait tried to back away in fear, but his broken legs were dangling in midair, unable to move. Who? Of course, I'm a huge fan of Bai Ye. I'm here to give you a return visit, the blood-stained man said with exasperation. Your legs have been broken once, and you're still being stubborn. Do you think you can insult Mr. Bai? I'd have to go to jail for beating you, you know. After saying that, the man stepped forward, holding a pure steel baseball bat, and raised it high. The other patients are sleeping, so try to keep your voice down. No. I won't sue. I won't do it again. I don't want the money anymore, Bates said in fear. But there's no going back. Like the other patients in the ward, a violent scream came from his mouth. 4 seconds later, the man casually slung the baseball bat over his shoulder and said, in a while, Mr. Bai's fervent fans will be doing a follow-up visit for you. I hope you'll be careful with your words then. Remember to give my service a good review, dear. After saying that, under Bet's furious gaze, he shoved past the bewildered doctor and walked towards the ward next door. You can't do this, the doctor mustered his courage and said. Facing the doctor, the man wasn't angry. Instead, he clasped his hands together and pleaded, Private Marseilles, it's all for work, please understand. I'm about to go to jail, please don't hold it against me. Finishing it sooner won't disturb the other patient's sleep. This is also a boost for the hospital's performance. Hope we can cooperate more in the future, the man laughed. What the hell, boosting the hospital's performance? Should I thank you? The doctor thought to himself. Under the enthusiastic follow-up visit of Mr. Bai's fervent fans, everything was over within 10 minutes, and then the police arrived belatedly. Take me away. I'm guilty, I admit it. I just didn't like them. It has nothing to do with my idol, Bai Ye. The several fanatical fans who had attacked automatically extended their hands. The police. Even though they knew this was related to Bai Ye, they had no evidence to accuse him. Team leader, this is too arrogant, an officer couldn't help but say from behind. What can you do? I heard that the NYPD chief's daughter is one of Bai Ye's girlfriends, the team leader said, sharing his inside information. The chief is also on Bai Ye's side. No wonder he took leave recently, it was to avoid suspicion, the officer nodded in realization. You just found out? Be careful what you say in the station from now on. Don't say things you shouldn't. That frontrunner for mayor, Wilson, is also one of Bai Ye's people. From now on, Bai Ye and his group will control New York City, the team leader said. This is too much. At SYNOPSIS headquarters, Carlson looked indignantly at the report from Bai Ye. Chief, are we just going to let Bai Ye keep causing trouble like this? Carlson asked. Has Bai Ye broken a law? Do you have any evidence? Nick Fury asked. At least he's willing to play within the rules. Instead of overturning the table, Natasha retorted, isn't this overturning the table? He's even acting openly, Nick Fury chuckled. If he hadn't forcefully suppressed the incident at the U.S. military base in Canada, the impact would have been hundreds of times greater. But this has already crossed the line, Carlson said. Especially the Kingpin, a normally law-abiding mob boss. Why is he following Bai Ye's crazy ways? There are more important matters now. Let's postpone Bai Ye's matter for a few days, Nick Fury said. What important matters? Natasha asked. Hydra, of course, Nick Fury thought to himself, remaining silent, but slowly said, have everyone gather at headquarters in a few days. The United Nations suspects there are few spies within our organization involved in the nuclear incident, so they've ordered us to conduct an in-house investigation. Upon hearing this, everyone nodded naturally. Such a major incident certainly warranted a thorough investigation. However, with tens of thousands of people within the organization, finding even a small group of spies would be incredibly difficult. Nick Fury lightly touched his phone. Professor X was prominently listed in the contact list. Previously, SHIELD headquarters naturally had devices to block Professor X's access, given the organization's vast secrets. However, simply turning them off for a short while on the day of the headquarters gathering would make everything clear. Although this carried some risk, it was worth trying to find the mole within the organization. Chapter 107 Kingpin, Can You Sleep? Inside the factory, Bai Ye was stretching his arms out to shoulder height. The weight of 4,000 tons pressed against his arms, causing them to creak and strain under the strain. His arms seemed on the verge of snapping, yet he continued to lift them, inching forward. The training effect seems to be accelerating, ignoring the pain of his body's cells being electrolyzed, Bai Ye thought to himself. At this moment, his normal strength was 3.8, but the additional strength attribute was 0.4. Don't underestimate this seemingly small increase, the difference is enormous. At this moment, a 0.1 in attribute represents a 15% difference in strength, 0.2 represents a 75% difference, and 0.3 represents a 180% increase. This extra 0.4 means his maximum strength limit has reached more than 4 times its original level, meaning his training efficiency has quadrupled. The proof is that yesterday his maximum strength was over 3,000 tons, and today it has jumped to 4,000 tons. While it was already outrageous before, it had never reached this level. Sure enough, this attribute panel is terrifying. It might be even more terrifying than that multiverse chat group in the future. Bai Ye thought back to how this panel initially pushed the chat group aside. Ding dong, just as Bai Ye was thinking and training, a doorbell rang outside the factory. Someone's here. Probably delivering aerospace data. I'll go open the door, Smith said to Zio Teoki, remembering Bai Ye's previous instructions, and then turned to walk towards the door. Pressing the switch, Smith opened the heavy factory door and saw a smartly dressed, pretty woman standing at the entrance. Our deliveryman is polite now, Smith thought strangely, then said, You're from the Doom Group delivering data, right? You can leave after giving me the data. Delivering data? Aren't you supposed to be here to give a lecture? Susan asked, puzzled. This was completely different from what Victor had said. Give a lecture? Smith paused for a moment before confirming, You're from the Doom Group, right? Mr. Wilson gave you the address, right? Susan nodded, that was correct. Then come in with me first, Smith said, then pressed the button to close the door and turned to walk into the factory. As the heavy iron door closed behind her, Susan felt a pang of worry, but gritted her teeth and followed Smith inside. After walking down a long corridor, Susan saw a dozen or so people in work clothes observing various parameters. In front of them was a huge, transparent tempered glass panel, and on the other side, a figure was indifferently exercising. While looking at the figure, Susan subconsciously exclaimed in her mind. A handsome man with black hair reaching his back stood on a high platform, his fair skin revealing muscles that bulged like cast iron, enduring terrifying blows. Visible electric lights swirled around his body, making him appear like a god descended from heaven. Of course, most importantly, this man was completely naked, exposed right in front of her. It was truly astonishing. Why isn't he wearing clothes? Susan suppressed her inner grumbling. Mr. Bai's exercising and will be finished in about 3 hours. You can stay here for a while, Smith said. What's this guy doing here? Bai Ye also noticed Susan, wondering why she was the one delivering documents. Was the head of the gene department really that free? As for the naked man, his body was enduring terrifying high-voltage current every second, even his cells were being forcibly dissolved by lightning. What normal clothes can withstand such intense exercise without being destroyed? He might as well just go without. Hello, I'm Mary, Little Rascal greeted with a smile, then asked, May I ask what brings you here? To be a teacher, to tutor Mr. Bai on aerospace knowledge, Susan replied somewhat awkwardly. Being adults, she clearly noticed the inappropriateness of the situation. Oh, I see, Little Rascal smiled thoughtfully, and then the two fell into an awkward silence. A minute later, Susan, watching Bai Ye exercise, couldn't help but ask, Mr. Bai, do you never wear clothes while exercising? The mischievous boy replied, You'll get used to it, Susan. 3 hours of awkward waiting passed in a daze. Bai Ye emerged, reaching out to a staff member to offer him clothes. Under Susan's averted gaze, Bai Ye calmly put on the clothes and walked up to her. Seeing that Bai Ye was already dressed, Susan bowed deeply and said, Mr. Bai, I apologize on behalf of my brother Johnny. He deeply regrets his rash actions yesterday. Bai Ye didn't speak, but instead scrutinized the woman before him with a slightly aggressive gaze. So corrupt, so incredibly corrupt. He hadn't expected Kingpin to act on his own and bring Susan over. It was truly an unexpected surprise. It would be cowardly not to take a bite of this meat that was already in his mouth. After a moment's thought, Bai Ye calmly turned around. Come with me. Come? Where to? Susan asked, startled. Eat, then go play, Bai Ye said calmly in front of Xiaoteoki. Play? But I'm here to teach you, Susan said. Don't be ridiculous. With your method of teaching, which has an information transmission rate of no more than 100 bits per second, I wouldn't learn it in a month. I'd rather do something more meaningful. Bai Ye walked out of the factory, ignoring Susan's slightly flushed cheeks and Xiaoteoki's gloomy expression, and said calmly, I'll wait for you outside. Remember to come out quickly, I don't want to wait too long. Then, as if remembering something, Bai Ye turned back strangely and said, or do you want to stay here? That's not impossible. After saying that, he quickened his pace, took out his phone from his pocket as he walked, found Kingpin's number, and dialed it. You did a good job. This is all you deserve. Kingpin smiled slightly, knowing that he had made the right move, and that he should increase the intensity next. Mr. Bai, your orders have been completed. We dealt with those protesters who went to the hospital again, Kingpin said. Not enough, Bai Ye said. Isn't that enough? Kingpin couldn't help but ask. Do you want them all executed? I'm not talking about those protesters, Bai Ye said, a hint of annoyance in his eyes. Kingpin, can you sleep? Sleep? What do you mean? Whenever I concentrate, whether I'm eating, showering, resting, or making love, all sorts of voices cursing me flood my head. It's really annoying, Bai Ye said impatiently, so broaden the scope of the attack. I don't want to hear any more annoying voices. Chapter 108 Bai Ye is afraid of cyberbullying. About a month ago, Bai Ye noticed that his 5 senses had become inexplicably heightened. It started with his eyes. He could gradually perceive light wavelengths outside the 380 to 780 nm range, invisible to the naked eye, such as infrared and ultraviolet rays. Colors that would be difficult for women to distinguish, Bai Ye could identify with a single glance, and even see the imperfections on a pinhead as if under a microscope. In his eyes, the whole world was flawed, and for several days, he was so uncomfortable that he couldn't even eat. Fortunately, by controlling his eye focus and using methods like distraction, he could restore his vision to normal. Next came touch, smell, hearing, and taste. These senses, beyond that of ordinary people, were a huge burden for him in daily life. Even when talking to ordinary people, he had to be extremely careful with his breathing, movements, speech, and even blinking, for fear of accidentally yelling at them. He could actually spit a dent into a steel plate. He had to be extremely careful every day, lest he be disturbed. The biggest impact was on his hearing. Even the slightest echo nearby would conjure up a vivid picture of his surroundings. He couldn't help but passively receive sounds within a kilometer radius, even if he tried to ignore them. As a result, he hadn't slept in the real world for a long time. His old habit of letting his body sink into virtual space whenever he felt the urge to rest was gone, only there was absolute silence, and the only sound was his own body. Fortunately, with his improved mental attributes and the mutation of his physique, his control over his body had increased dramatically. With a physique attribute of 4.0, he could even control his heartbeat rhythm. He believed that once he reached the level of cellular control, this side effect would completely disappear. But before that, he needed to improve his living environment, starting with dealing with the constant, intrusive noises. Actually, I'm a little fragile psychologically, and I'm afraid of cyberbullying. The thought of people insulting me online keeps me up at night, Bai Ye said in an incredibly gentle tone. So, since I can't sleep, let's all stay up all night together. This, Kingpin hesitated. How far do you want to go? Then the entire internet, of course. Important figures must be severely punished, but there are too many ordinary netizens, you can't possibly handle them all. Just pick a few hundred and dox them, then deliver the goodwill to their doorsteps. Even knowing Bai Ye was crazy, Kingpin still gasped. This was going to offend the whole world. Compared to Bai Ye now, the old Kingpin was practically a model citizen. At least in the past, although he had done many bad things, he had never challenged the public's moral bottom line, never dared to put those things in the open. But now Bai Ye's demands were practically blatantly exporting malice to the entire world, and the backlash would be the greatest. Damn it, the powerful figure I found seems to be insane. Kingpin felt a sense of unease, but gritted his teeth and insisted, no problem, I'll do as you instruct. Bai Ye said calmly, hanging up the phone. He had only mentioned this matter briefly. After all, these were just some malicious people spreading negativity online. What kind of people were they that he needed to personally handle? Taking a step, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet through his shoes, Bai Ye seemed lost in thought. He would probably reach the limit of the hydraulic press tomorrow, so he might as well go underground to train. After all, the pressure at the Earth's core reached 3.6 million atmospheres, and even the outer core had 1.36 million atmospheres. On average, there was more than 3,000 tons of pressure per cubic centimeter, and the distance from the surface was far enough to allow him to freely unleash his power, which should be enough for him to train for a while. As he pondered, Bai Ye saw Susan emerge somewhat awkwardly from the factory behind him. "Where are we going to eat next? Just follow me, I know a good restaurant," Bai Ye said. On the top floor of Stark Industries, Tony Stark sat cross-legged on a sofa, circulating his inner energy. Since witnessing the effects of inner energy, he had been spending all his time on it. Knock, knock, knock. A knock sounded at the door. Stark slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, "Come in." The door opened quickly, and his assistant, Pepper, walked in. "What is it?" "Don't disturb my cultivation unless it's something important," Tony said slowly. He felt a little addicted to cultivation lately. Pepper looked at Stark helplessly, as if looking at emperors who neglected state affairs due to their obsession with cultivation. Since coming into contact with inner energy, this guy had even stopped playing with women, making her wonder if inner energy had a castration effect. "You've already cancelled tonight's awards ceremony, remember you can't miss tomorrow's schedule," Pepper reminded him. "What are my plans for tomorrow?" Tony asked. "I knew he forgot," Pepper sighed inwardly. "Colonel Rhodes has strictly required you to be present in the email to demonstrate the latest missiles to the military at the airbase in Afghanistan. If you're not there by tomorrow, you might see Colonel Rhodes parachuting into our building to find you." "Demonstrate missiles?" "I vaguely remember." Tony nodded indifferently. "Then it's settled. Remember to remind me tomorrow." "No problem," Pepper nodded. As long as Tony was willing to go, everything was fine. It seems Stark is going to Afghanistan tomorrow, which means the next part of Iron Man 1 storyline is coming up. Late at night, in his room at the villa, Bai Ye thought to himself. After pondering the contents of the Iron Man trilogy, Bai Ye slowly shook his head, deciding to ignore it. After all, it wasn't useful to him, so he wouldn't get involved. Stark could come back alive without him anyway, so what was the point of them going? "Bai, what are you thinking about?" Camilla, her face flushed and sweat soaking her fair skin, looked at Bai Ye, who had slowed down, with a puzzled expression. "It's nothing, someone's sleeping." "Keep your voice down," Bai Ye reminded her, then reached out and covered Camilla's red lips, starting another round of cards. Beside them, Susan, who was responsible for tutoring Bai Ye, was already wrapped in a sheet and fast asleep, having already left the game. The night was still very long. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 The Hydra is here. An unfamiliar ceiling. The next day, Susan slowly awoke from her sleep, opening her eyes to look at the chandelier hanging above her head, and thought to herself. But the next moment, realizing what she had done the night before, she sat bolt upright in bed, then realized she was naked and hurriedly covered her impressive curves with a blanket. She cautiously looked around, and only after confirming that no one was in the room did she relax, leaning against the wall, clutching her head and inwardly groaning, "Oh God, what did I do yesterday? How did I fall for that young man's trick?" In Susan's memory, the night before seemed to have been spent at a Western restaurant with Bai Ye. During the meal, he was very well behaved, only occasionally steering the conversation towards Reed, asking if he knew what a sentinel was. After dinner, in a good mood, Bai Ye took her directly to neighboring Washington for shopping, and after they had had their fill, he finally revealed his true intentions, suggesting they go to his villa for a while. She vividly remembered that after she mustered the courage to refuse, Bai Ye smiled innocently and said, "Susan, you don't want your brother who offended me to become your sister, do you?" So, half forced and half willing, she followed Bai Ye back to the villa, where she met Camilla. Susan didn't want to recall what happened next, because Bai Ye kissed Camilla the moment they met. Then, after separating, he made the absurd demand that they both sleep together, which she, of course, reluctantly agreed to. Then, indignant, she witnessed what a pile driver was like. Awake, at that moment, the doorknob was pressed, and Camilla, her comrade from the previous night, walked in, holding a box, seemingly oblivious to everyone else. Susan instinctively pulled the blanket tighter around herself, feeling extremely uncomfortable. "Come on, I saw everything last night, what's there to hide? You were screaming louder than me," Camilla scoffed indifferently. As she spoke, she took a tiny, bright red blood droplet the size of a grain of rice from the box and popped it into her mouth. Camilla felt an energy 1,000 times stronger than a month ago spreading through her abdomen, and she squinted her eyes in satisfaction. Susan blushed and asked, Where's Mr. Bai? Just call him Bai Ye. You're 5 or 6 years older than him, why pretend to be young? You were calling him brother in bed last night," Camilla replied. "Of course, he's out exercising at this time. I came to deliver a message. He's already given you leave from work. You can arrange your own time to rest today. But he was very satisfied last night, so we'll continue tonight," Camilla said, pouting. After saying that, she didn't look at Susan's expression, turned around, and slammed the door shut. "Susan, I haven't even said yes yet." Unlike Bai Ye's routine in real life, the internet was filled with condemnation of him. With Bai Ye's actions, various nicknames such as talented but immoral, handsome but immoral, and laborious but useless were bestowed upon him. As the hottest topic right now, the entire internet was filled with condemnation and ridicule of Bai Ye. Meanwhile, on a program in the United States, the host directly steered the conversation towards Bai Ye. "What do you think of the actions of Bai Ye, the founder of Inner Force, yesterday?" the host asked, looking at the invited celebrity, Colin. Colin replied without hesitation, "Is there even a question? This is absolutely fascist Hitler's behavior, directly breaking the legs of hundreds of protesters. This Bai Ye has gone mad. I fully support the normalization of books. The tax proposal passed by Congress yesterday is completely unreasonable, and Bai Ye's instigation yesterday should also put him in jail." This live broadcast quickly generated a great deal of reaction, with many people commenting in support. However, one dissenting comment soon attracted attention due to its unusual nature. A brand new account called White Knight's #1 fanatic fan was openly commenting on Corin's account, "I am a fanatic fan of White Knight. Please retract your previous inappropriate remarks, or I can't imagine what measures I will take." What? Are there really such filial sons? Excellent video, witnessing the diversity of humanity, letting me know that idiots can go online. You're finished, bro, your brain has been infected by White Knight. Because the content was too straightforward, this comment was quickly pushed to the top, and netizens from all walks of life mocked him as a die-hard White Knight fan. Not long after, Corin also noticed this comment and replied without hesitation, "Impossible, I represent justice, and I will never surrender to fascism." This comment quickly brought the topic to a new level of popularity, but soon the new account also replied. However, judging from the tone of the comment, the other party did not express remorse but was mostly joking and mocking. The fascists are here. Just as netizens were watching the clown, half an hour later, Corin's family directly called the police, and then public opinion quickly exploded. A photo of Corin being carried into hospital on a stretcher went viral online, quickly leading to suspicions that it was the work of a fanatical follower of the account associated with the account. However, the account denied this, instead posting another message, "Germany has Hitler, and White Knight has me." This was followed by a doxing post, revealing the account was the most vocal commenter under Corin's post, "The fascists are here." Half an hour later, the doxed account posted a picture of a bloody man lying in an alleyway. Subsequently, a third victim was also exposed by the same account, again with a doxing post and the same sarcastic comment, "The fascists are here." This malicious act quickly attracted widespread attention online. Police staked out the third victim's home, ready to arrest the account's target upon arrival. Everything went strangely smoothly. Upon seeing the armed police, the man offered no resistance and voluntarily surrendered, even smiling and reciting the incantation to the terrified target before being taken away. 10 minutes later, the target was dragged into a corner and brutally beaten again, after which the target's account posted a picture of the beating. Meanwhile, another account, nicknamed White Knight 2, a fanatic fan, posted another message, a screenshot of doxing and the phrase, "The fascists are here." This time, faced with a relentless barrage of fanatical fans, everyone fell silent for a moment. Nick Fury, Watching the entire internet's reaction, almost mistook the fascists for Hydra. Chapter 110 Meridians do not exist. Watching the online uproar, Nick Fury shook his head with a headache. This kid was really going too far. This is also an unstable factor, Nick Fury thought to himself. At this moment, Coulson walked in from outside the room. What's the matter? Nick Fury asked as he saw Coulson enter. Coulson concealed the shock in his eyes and placed a stack of research reports in front of Nick Fury, saying, "Director, the research report is out." "Oh, is it the internal energy research I asked you to do before?" Nick Fury asked. "That's right. According to our research, the phenomenon we discovered is quite astonishing." Coulson took a deep breath and said, "There is no such thing as meridians in the human body." "Huh?" Nick Fury was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously sat up straight, asking, "No meridians? Then how is internal energy cultivated?" Nick Fury himself had practiced martial arts, so he clearly knew the feeling of internal energy surging within the body. "My description was inaccurate. Strictly speaking, before cultivating internal energy, there are no observable meridians or organs in the human body," Coulson said solemnly. "It's not that you can cultivate techniques because you have meridians, but rather that meridians are specifically generated in the human body after cultivating techniques." Nick Fury had become completely serious and sat up straight, saying, "Explain in detail." Coulson slowly explained, "We've already done experiments. People who haven't read the book Everyone Has the Power to Cultivate can't be found to have meridians in their bodies. Only after they tried cultivating were we able to successfully dissect meridians in their bodies. The knowledge in Bai Ye's book is like a virus, infecting every cultivator. Unconsciously, we might even change our species." Hearing Coulson's description, Nick Fury was speechless. He took a deep breath and confirmed, "Are you sure? The research department has confirmed it multiple times. Before, we were wondering why only humans had meridians, but now we know it's because animals can't understand the concept of cultivation techniques, so they can't generate these organs." "Director, this matter has a huge impact. It won't be long before the researchers outside discover this," Coulson said. "Let me think about it." Nick Fury rubbed his head, looking quite troubled. He hadn't expected that the Hydra matter wouldn't be resolved before this incident involving Bai Ye occurred. In just a few days, at least billions of humans had practiced the everyone has a skill technique, meaning that their physical constitutions had been altered without their knowledge. Moreover, they didn't know how this mysterious power worked. If the internal energy cultivation method had a backdoor, they might die without anyone noticing. Most importantly, did Bai Ye know about this? If he did, what did he think? After thinking for a long time, Nick Fury finally made a decision: add Bai Ye to the Sentinel Project's watch list. "I understand," Coulson nodded. Despite his amiable nature, he had always disapproved of Bai Ye's actions. "By the way, how is the Sentinel Project progressing?" Nick Fury asked. "The progress is astonishing. With Dr. Reed's help, we've solved a problem that has plagued us for a long time, theoretically resolving the issue of Sebastian Shaw's mutant genes collapsing after fusing with the Sentinels. Next, given some time to cultivate these cells, we can give the Sentinels the ability to absorb energy. Later, with Dr. Reed's help, we also plan to implant Quicksilver's mutant cells into the Sentinels. However, Dr. Reed said that Darwin and Mystique cells seem to have reached their limit, making fusion extremely difficult," Coulson said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He certainly knew how terrifying the prospects of the Sentinel Project were, especially the abilities of Sebastian Shaw, the mutant nicknamed Black King. Nick Fury remarked, "It seems that the various mutant cells Stryker has accumulated over the years have made a huge contribution." When he received the Sentinel Project, he also saw the reserve Stryker had accumulated after years of dedicated struggle against mutants, and he was truly astonished. Wolverine, Sabretooth, Quicksilver, Mystique, Black King, White Queen, Darwin, Red Devil, Cyclops, the Illusionist. Each cell within them, taken individually, is a terrifyingly powerful entity. Stryker managed to collect so many, it's truly defying the heavens. If all of these were fused into a single Sentinel, the monster created would be unimaginable. A Sentinel capable of wielding over a dozen top-tier mutant abilities simultaneously, ruling the Earth wouldn't be a pipe dream. So why did I keep thinking about the Avengers? Why not just have a Sentinel squad? Nick Fury listened to Coulson's report. What ability could be more terrifying than this? Thinking of this, he suddenly felt that Bai Ye's situation was nothing compared to this. Bai Ye was nothing. With the Sentinels, who could stand against him? Meanwhile, inside the factory, Bai Ye, shirtless, watched Rogue press his arms against his body, constantly absorbing his energy during a break from training. Feeling his strength steadily draining away, Bai Ye thoughtfully asked, "Mary, do you think death is an outcome or a state?" "Huh? Mr. Bai, what did you say?" Mary looked up at Bai Ye, startled. "Biological death is the cessation of bodily functions and the cessation of thought. If death is a state, could it be considered recovery through exercise?" Bai Ye pondered. "Since my body becomes stronger after being attacked because of healing, what about death? Can death also be considered an attack on my body and consciousness? Or even further, wouldn't alteration of consciousness, erasure of the timeline, your absorption ability, wouldn't those count as attacks on me? This doesn't seem right. It's a bit unscientific." Little rascal thought this theory was a bit far-fetched. Unscientific, Bai Ye fell into deep thought. His infinitely strengthening physique already transcended the boundaries of ordinary physical phenomena. Could he also transcend death, which ordinary people fear like a tiger? Seeing the little rascal's worried look, Bai Ye smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, at least I won't try anything rashly before I'm absolutely certain of reviving him." "That's good." The little rascal secretly breathed a sigh of relief, afraid that Bai Ye would act impulsively and try it. Besides, this machine has already reached its limit. Bai Ye looked at the hydraulic press next to him. "This place can be disbanded after tomorrow, but the operator's movements will still be restricted to the factory." As he spoke, Bai Ye took out his phone, found Professor X's number, and dialed it. Chapter 111 New Group Members. "What did you say? You want me to attack you, in Utopia?" Professor X, who had just hung up on Nick Fury, was shocked by Bai Ye's request over the phone. "That's right, you can use your mental power to continuously destroy my brain consciousness, and that will count as helping me," Bai Ye said into the phone. His power growth was now snowballing, only increasing further, but his mental attribute growth was slowing down. Or rather, it wasn't slowing down, but rather failing to keep up with the rate of power growth. Since that was the case, he could only find another way, such as having Professor X, a master of mind control, to increase his mental strength. This, Professor X hesitated. No one had ever made such a request to him before. "Don't you think your use of your abilities is too rigid? You only know how to forcibly control other people's consciousness, but you don't have any mental attack methods. This is also a kind of training for you." Bai Ye smiled and said, "Use your brain more while you're young. It's also a way to prevent dementia in old age." Charles, who is already in his 70s or 80s. After hesitating for a while, Charles finally agreed. "Okay, be careful. Remember to attack me with all your might. Don't be afraid that I will suffer brain death or anything. Also, you are not allowed to peek into the memories in my brain, if you don't want to go crazy." As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Ye felt a powerful and domineering mental force surge into his brain from dozens of kilometers away, trying to forcibly destroy his consciousness. But at this moment, his mental force was no longer as strong as when he first met Charles a month ago. He kept his six senses still, and his mind was like a reef in the sea, letting Charles wash over him. In his brain, there was a constant stinging sensation. Bai Ye kept his breathing steady and did not try to resist. Instead, just like when he was training, he relaxed his mind and let the mental force churn in his brain. "Not bad, that's the kind of pain I feel," Bai Ye exclaimed. "Where I feel pain, that's where I'm getting stronger." He then glanced at his attribute panel. The description read, "Your brain is currently under mental attack. Estimated duration: 4 hours 12 minutes. Mental attribute increased by 0.1. Not bad, at least 4 or 5 times more effective than usual training. When Professor X reaches his limit, I can have him use a brainwave amplifier. That thing can directly enhance his mental abilities to the point of wiping out billions of people worldwide," Bai Ye thought. "By the way, SHIELD called me today," Charles said over the phone. "SHIELD? What do they want?" Bai Ye asked, puzzled. "What business could they possibly have?" "They want me to investigate the Hydra mole with an SHIELD," Charles asked. "Do I need help, Hydra?" Bai Ye suddenly realized. Indeed, searching the brain was faster than anything else. "It's up to you. After all, it's an official organization, give them some face," Bai Ye said indifferently. "I understand," Charles said slowly. Meanwhile, near an Air Force base in Afghanistan, Stark, having just finished introducing a new missile, sat in his car, joking with several soldiers. I heard you attended White Knight's new book launch, a soldier beside him asked curiously. Of course, and don't underestimate my stamina. Once I get back, with the internal energy of all the company's employees, I can become a superhero in no time. Perhaps I should start thinking about what my title will be then, Stark said, raising an eyebrow. Boom, but as they were engrossed in their conversation, a loud explosion erupted from the military jeep behind them. The men hurriedly turned around, only to see the vehicle engulfed in flames, forcibly totaled. The lead driver quickly stopped the car and ordered Stark, "Stay here." Several soldiers then rushed out of the vehicle, weapons in hand, ready for battle. Soon, the sounds of gunfire erupted. But seeing the shattered windows, Stark ignored the soldiers' orders and simply got out and fled. A minute later, staring at the missile bearing his company's label falling before him, a flicker of despair crossed Stark's eyes. Boom! With another explosion, Tony tore open his chest, blood gushing from the excruciating pain, and collapsed unconscious. Before losing consciousness, he seemed to see a screen flash across his vision. Tony Stark, personal signature. It's time to consider what my hero title should be. Iron Man? The standard configuration for chat groups. In the post-apocalyptic world, the all-knowing and all-powerful Immortal's eyes lit up when he saw the new additions to the chat group. This name represented a ticket to Marvel. Thinking of the various magical items in the Marvel world, a burning desire flashed in the all-knowing and all-powerful Immortal's eyes. There were so many benefits to be gained there. Without much thought, he, who had previously been picky about group members, unhesitatingly invited them to join. Tony Stark joined the chat group. Then, a cold, emotionless mechanical voice entered the ears of every group member. Bai Ye, who was undergoing both physical and mental training, suddenly looked up. Tony Stark, Bai Ye was somewhat surprised and uncertain. What a coincidence? Is the omniscient and omnipotent being phishing again? He suspected that the omniscient and omnipotent had somehow found out that his world was phishing. Judging by the time, Tony Stark is currently in Afghanistan? Could it really be him? Bai Ye pondered, then with a bang, he broke free from the training machine and leaped to the ground. Regardless, he only needed to go to Afghanistan to find out. However, even if the Tony Stark in the group was real, he didn't know which multiverse he was from. Perhaps the two weren't even in the same universe. But if they just happened to be in the same world, then he could properly repay that omniscient and omnipotent. "Boss, is there something you need?" Smith asked, puzzled. "Yes, I have something to do. I'm going abroad for a trip and won't be back until tonight. This equipment can be turned off, I won't need it anymore," Bai Ye said calmly, draping his clothes over himself. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Ye's figure disappeared from their sight, heading towards Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in the chat group, a large group of members stared in surprise at the new member who had suddenly joined. Since that guy named Crimson joined, the group hadn't had any new members for a long time. Kimijimakana, finally, a new person has joined? Welcome, Gentleman Sword, I am Yu Buquin from the Huishan sect. Welcome to the chat group, newcomer. If you have any questions, I can explain them to you. Ghost Catching Taoist, newcomers can ask the administrators about their future. Chapter 112 Instant Slaughter. Inside SHIELD headquarters, the intelligence department was urgently mobilized to analyze intelligence from the Afghanistan region. Tony Stark's disappearance after the attack in Afghanistan had spurred the entire department to quickly mobilize and search for his whereabouts. At this moment, Agent Hill looked at the latest investigation report that had been sent to her, a strange glint in her eyes. "Director, an unidentified flying object has been detected departing from New York, moving at a speed of Mach 3.4. Mach 4, Nick Fury was taken aback upon hearing his subordinate's report, but quickly reacted, saying, "Call Bai Ye immediately and ask if he's on the move." Turning to look at the busy intelligence department, Nick Fury pondered for a moment and said, "Mark the object's trajectory immediately and see if it overlaps with a location in Afghanistan." "Yes, Director," Hill nodded, and the trajectory map was quickly marked. Because the unidentified flying object's trajectory was very straight, without changing direction at all, it was almost a straight line on the map, its intentions very clear. The team quickly confirmed by extending the object's movement path, Afghanistan was indeed within the trajectory. "Chief, we can't get through to Bai Ye on the phone. We asked Kingpin, but he's just giving us the runaround," Calson said after hanging up. Nick Fury, almost certain of his guess, tapped the table in front of him with a hint of doubt. When did Bai Ye become so close to Stark that he was willing to travel so far to rescue him? That's settled then. Intelligence continues its work. As for the flying object, don't worry about it. Their purpose should be the same as ours, Nick Fury said. Meanwhile, in the group chat, various members sent friendly congratulations to Tony Stark, but no matter what message they sent, it all seemed to sync without a trace. What's going on? This foreign friend is just like the previous Senior Deep Blue, not replying to messages. On Mount Hui, which had now turned into an armory, Bai stroked his beard with a hint of doubt. Especially when he thought about Bai Ye suddenly coming back to life and cursing at the administrator in the group chat. Although the administrator had explained, he still had his doubts. And this new member hadn't spoken for so long. Could he have been muted by the all-knowing and all-powerful immortal? Meanwhile, in modern society, Kana Kamishima stared wide-eyed in surprise, for she had just remembered that the name Tony Stark sounded familiar. Although she lived before 2000, before the Iron Man movies were being made, as someone who followed trends, she knew of Marvel Comics, the predecessor to Marvel, and had even heard of Iron Man, the current second-tier hero. Kana Kamishima, is the newcomer Iron Man? I mean, is your father Howard Stark, Gentleman Sword? How did you know about the new group member's family? Kana Kamishima, you're from ancient times, so you don't know. Mr. Stark's name is the same as a comic book series I've read, which is why I asked. But it's probably just a coincidence. After all, the world is so big, there are many people with the same name. Ghost Catcher, I see. The omniscient and omnipotent immortal looked at Kana Kamishima's questions in the group chat, feeling a slight headache. He felt his carefully constructed image was about to collapse. This was why he didn't want to approach modern people, it was just too easy to give himself away. Seeing Stark remain silent in their private chat, Bai Ye frowned. Stark hasn't replied at all. Could he already be in Afghanistan? At that moment, a deafening rumble of thunder echoed across the Afghan sky, and Bai Ye abruptly stopped, hovering in midair. After a long journey, standing 50 kilometers above the stratosphere and mesosphere, looking down at the thick clouds, Bai Ye mentally mapped the entire Afghan region. According to the movie, the terrorists who kidnapped Stark were based in a desert cave in Afghanistan, with a large quantity of weapons and ammunition exposed nearby. Stark hadn't changed locations during his imprisonment, and given his injuries, he couldn't possibly be too far from the attack site to receive treatment. Therefore, he only needed to focus on the U.S. Air Base. Excluding cities and villages, only 4 or 5 locations remained to investigate. With this thought, Bai Ye swooped down, smashing a hole tens of meters wide through the clouds before flying towards the ground. Inside the cave, under the watchful eyes of guards and with the help of several medics, Ethan nervously removed large pieces of shrapnel from Tony Stark's chest. The smaller particles were too difficult to remove. A magnetic device would be implanted later to prevent them from reaching his heart. Boom! Just as he was carefully operating, a deafening roar echoed from outside the cave, the earth trembling even from a distance. What happened? Did the explosives planted outside finally detonate? Ethan thought to himself as he performed surgery on a celebrity he had only met once. Meanwhile, outside the cave, amidst the billowing sand, Bai Ye, seemingly a god, stood suspended in midair, supported by his inner strength, with a 5-meter-deep sand pit beneath his feet. Tony Stark is here, Bai Ye said calmly in Pashto, looking at the terrorists pointing guns at him. During the questioning, Bai Ye slightly tilted his ear, quickly constructing in his mind the terrain within hundreds of meters of the base using the surrounding echoes. He also heard 4 or 5 people performing surgery on a man lying unconscious on a bed in a nearby cave. You're Bai Ye, the terrorists asked in surprise, looking at the handsome Asian face with flowing black hair. They too had cultivated martial arts, so of course they recognized the young man. Wrong answer. I found my target. I don't need you anymore, Bai Ye said coldly. Looking at the indifferent young man before them, the terrorists felt a sense of foreboding and hurriedly roared, "Fire! Fire!" Before they could finish, it was as if thousands of cannonballs exploded around them. Amidst the roar and howl of the atmosphere, all the terrorists who wanted to pull the trigger instantly lost control of their arms. Without any resistance, in just a moment, hundreds of heads flew into the air. Then, in a dizzying spin, the terrorists watched helplessly as the headless bodies stood still, not yet fallen. Before the last vestiges of consciousness in their brains faded, all they could see was the violently shattered air, with surrounding military installations, supplies, and their own flesh and blood all turning into fragments and gore that flew outwards in all directions. Chapter 113 Rescue and Threat. In the yellow sands of Afghanistan, an area was shrouded in billowing dust. Where hundreds of terrorist militants had gathered, only a handful remained. As the dust settled, the earth, as if bombarded by artillery, was ravaged with countless deep trenches several meters wide. Scattered human remains were mixed with the flying debris, turning the area into a battlefield of carnage. In the center of the battlefield, Bai Ye silently looked down at his clothes, torn apart by his supersonic movement, and retrieved another set from his ethereal space, donning it. After spending a few seconds dealing with the remaining enemies, Bai Ye's gaze turned to a cave not far away. Taking a step, Bai Ye lightly stomped on the ground, and as the earth cracked beneath his feet, he leaped directly to the cave entrance and walked straight inside. Fearing that his movements would cause too much damage and collapse the cave, Bai Ye didn't approach too closely, so the guards inside remained intact. With a deafening roar outside, the guards inside the cave rushed out like startled birds, eager to see what was happening. But Bai Ye, unwilling to offer further explanation, simply flicked his right hand as the guards emerged. Before Bai Ye's supersonic flick, the almost solidified air instantly transformed into a terrifying vacuum wave, shaped and enveloped by his true energy, its power comparable to a cannonball. Boom! 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 A fist-sized burst of energy slammed into several guards, easily piercing their flesh and blood. Then, amidst a frenzied tearing airflow, most of their bodies exploded. These guards hadn't even seen Bai Ye's face, merely a fleeting glimpse was enough for his body to be blasted apart by the energy blast. The blood and debris that splattered onto Bai Ye were completely blocked by the surging internal energy within him, unable to get any closer. As if cutting through vegetables, Bai Ye advanced towards the surgical area with effortless grace, the entire process as smooth as flowing water, his steps never faltering. A moment later, Bai Ye stopped, a slight smile appearing on his face. He gently knocked on the iron door beside him and said, "Hello, Mr. Ethan, you can stop the surgery now." Ethan, who had been focused entirely on the surgery, finally stopped trying to save him. The medical staff assisting him were speechless with shock at the sight of the several mangled corpses lying behind Bai Ye. Turning slowly, Ethan looked at Bai Ye's face with surprise, recognizing him. "You're here to save him? How do you know our names?" "I'm operating on Mr. Stark. His condition is very critical." "I need a little more time," Ethan said in surprise. "No need, I can save him." "Thank you for your help earlier," Bai Ye said politely as he stepped forward. "No need? Do you also perform surgery? He has shrapnel embedded in his chest." And next, Ethan started to describe Stark's condition to Bai Ye, but then he stopped. Before Ethan could finish speaking, Bai Ye had already stepped onto the operating table, his right hand resting directly on Stark's shoulder. A surge of purple energy flowed into Stark's body, instantly detecting the shrapnel in his chest. The next moment, a torrent of internal energy entered Tony's body, and with a few crisp clanging sounds, all the shrapnel embedded in his chest flew out, falling to the ground after arcing through the air. "This is amazing," Ethan didn't know how to describe it, only stammering. Then, looking at the blood seeping from the wound, reminded him, "Let me stop the bleeding after you remove the shrapnel." Before he could finish, seeing the blood and scabs forming on Stark's chest at a visible speed, he was speechless, staring in disbelief. "Is the effect of internal energy this good? It wasn't mentioned in your book, because what I cultivate is completely different from yours. Of course, it doesn't have such a good effect," Bai Ye explained. He had now advanced the Everyone Has skill technique to level 2.0, directly simulating the effects of the Divine Illumination scripture from the Lian Changju, a martial arts manual. According to the power of the Divine Illumination scripture, even someone who has been hanged and stopped breathing for an hour can be revived, let alone the critically injured and dying Tony Stark. Although Bai Ye's effect is currently only a simulation, it is still enough to solve the current problem. Soon, under the circulation of Bai Ye's internal energy, Stark's bloodless pale face immediately regained its vitality and returned to normal. Ethan and several medical staff standing to the side were speechless with shock. Internal energy already has the effect of prolonging life and preventing all diseases. If this ability were to manifest, those pharmaceutical companies would be wiped out, and they would definitely go bankrupt. Looking at Stark, who had recovered but was still in a coma, and the new member in the group who hadn't said a word, Bai Ye's guess was mostly confirmed. "Sir, what do we do next?" Ethan asked from the side. Turning around, he looked at Ethan, who had been thinking for a moment, and said, "I've taken care of the terrorists outside. Go find a drivable car and come with me to the nearest Air Force base." As he spoke, Bai Ye crossed his arms and pointed a finger at the unconscious Stark, saying, "You two pick two people to carry this guy on a stretcher." With that, Bai Ye turned and walked out of the cave. Seeing this, Ethan quickly followed behind him. After traversing a road reeking of blood, the two emerged from the cave into the sunlight. Under the blinding midday sun, Ethan's eyes squinted instinctively, taking a moment to adjust to the intense light outside the cave. Then, the scene before him, as if struck by a tornado and artillery shells simultaneously, made him gasp. This place, resembling post-war ruins, was littered with debris. Could there even be cars there? But soon he realized his worries were unnecessary, because several hundred meters away, there were indeed some vehicles that hadn't been swept away by the storm. A dozen minutes later, two cars carrying several people headed to a nearby U.S. Air Force base. They encountered no obstacles along the way, and soon saw Colonel James Rhodes and a group of U.S. soldiers lined up at the entrance. "Thank you so much for saving Tony," Rhodes said gratefully. "General Ross just called and told me about you. Please go inside and rest." Bai Ye got out of the car and nodded slightly. "Stark is still unconscious inside. He'll wake up in a little while. I have some things to discuss with him after he wakes up." Half an hour later, Stark felt his mind clear and gradually awoke from his unconsciousness. At this moment, a calm male voice sounded from the side. "You're awake." Stark was startled by the sudden voice beside him and turned around to see a very familiar person standing there. "Bai Ye, from now on, you are not allowed to do anything unnecessary, including touching that thing in your line of sight. If I see you make any strange movements, your heart will be instantly pierced by me." Chapter 114. No one can refuse my friendship. Inside a private room at an Air Force base in Afghanistan, Bai Ye looked at Stark with indifferent eyes. Looking at the young man before him, Tony Stark immediately recognized him. "It's you. What are you doing here? Looks like you remember me a little. As for why I'm here, it's because I came to rescue you." With Bai Ye's words, Stark immediately recalled everything that had happened to him. He had been attacked by terrorists in Afghanistan. And he had also been hit by one of his own missiles. Recalling the pain before he lost consciousness, Stark opened his collar to look at his chest. His chest was now intact, with only a few scars proving that what had happened before was not an illusion. "What exactly is going on?" Stark said, then noticed a virtual border the size of a human head in his field of vision, like a chat application, occasionally popping up a message or two. "Is this the thing Bai Ye mentioned in his field of vision?" Tony muttered to himself. "Where should I begin?" Bai Ye crossed his arms, lightly tapping his left arm with his right index finger, then said, "Let's start with the attack you suffered. First of all, this attack was carried out by your uncle Obadiah's men, with the aim of eliminating you." "Wait, what did you say? How could it be him?" "Ouch! What are you doing?" Hearing that Obadiah was responsible for the attack, Tony Stark was shocked and wanted to refute, but the next moment, Bai Ye lightly tapped his forehead with his index finger, causing him to cry out in pain. Seeing Stark clutching his bruised forehead and gasping for breath, Bai Ye slowly withdrew his right hand. "Didn't you see I was talking? Don't interrupt me, you've disrupted my train of thought," Bai Ye said. "Anyway, this attack was sent by your uncle. If you don't believe it, you can go back and investigate yourself." Stark wanted to curse, but clutching his throbbing forehead, he shamefully chickened out. "Now, here's why I saved you. It's simple, I need you to do something for me." "You should have noticed that transparent border in your line of sight," Bai Ye said. "That border is a communication platform spanning different worlds, and I'm a member of it. You just happened to be selected by this platform when you were attacked." Hearing Bai Ye's words, Stark's gaze swept over the chat group in front of him. Looking at the constantly flashing messages, he instinctively wanted to try and interact with the chat group, but Bai Ye's cold words stopped him in his tracks. "If you don't want to be killed by me, you'd better stop your curiosity now and wait for me to finish before you act." These words immediately stopped Stark from acting. He said helplessly, "Okay, then you go first." To put it simply, I also joined this chat group 2 months ago. The first version of Everyone Has Skills that I posted before was also obtained from this chat group, but unlike you, this group had an administrator before I joined. As an administrator, you naturally have certain privileges. Because the administrator was wary of me, he muted me on my first day in the group. As for the so-called mute, It means that you are prohibited from posting any information in the group. You can only passively receive it, Bai Ye explained. So you want me to plead with the administrator to lift your mute, Stark said, but he saw Bai Ye staring at him with a look as if you were an idiot. Bai Ye said, I want you to pretend that you have never known me. Communicate with that administrator, and then trick him into coming to our world so that I can kill him. Kill him? Stark looked at the boy in front of him. Was he really more ruthless than him despite his young age? Just because he banned you? So you want to kill him? What kind of character is that administrator? Stark asked. He hoped Bai Ye's answer would give him an excuse to agree to take action. I don't care about his character, Bai Ye said impatiently. Whether he's a rapist or a savior, if he offends me, he'll die, even if he's some kind of saint. If he offends me, I'll kill him. Why do I need so many reasons to kill someone? It's like you, a playboy, remembering how many women you've slept with. You wouldn't consider what bad things the other person has done before sleeping with them, would you? Bai Ye asked. Looking at the indecisive Stark, Bai Ye urged, just one question, are you going to help or not? What if I say no? Stark probed. Then you'll offend me too, Bai Ye said, looking at Stark with icy eyes. Sitting on the bed, Stark instinctively moved a little away from Bai Ye before saying, you want to kill me too? No, 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 it's not just that, Bai Ye counted on his fingers. First, you'll die. Then, I'll cooperate with Obadiah, who wanted to kill you, and let him take over your company and make it bigger and stronger. Then, I see your secretary, Pepper, is still quite attractive. You probably have a thing for her, but since you're already dead, of course, we can't let him live a life of widowhood. I'll recommend Obadiah to marry her, and every year on your 7th day after death, I'll bring her to your grave to offer incense. I've already thought of 72 revenge plans, these are just 2 or 3. For your mental health, I won't go into the rest. Stark was speechless. This guy was practically a devil. What if I agree to your demands? Then you'll gain my friendship, Bai Ye smiled. What good is that? Stark thought to himself. Seeing through Stark's thoughts, Bai Ye said, gaining the friendship of superheroes means they'll micromanage you and hold you to high standards. But gaining my friendship means that as long as you don't commit any fundamental errors, whether it's rape, murder, or anything else, I won't interfere too much. With my permission, you'll receive a pardon. Bai Ye looked at Stark and said, you know Kingpin, right? As the biggest mob boss in America, he's connected to most of New York's organized crime. My friend is naturally his friend too. If you have any trouble in the future, you can contact him directly to resolve it. When I rule the world, you, my friend, will naturally be able to kill whomever you want, sleep with whomever you want, do whatever you want, and no one will dare to stop you. Do you really think that I can't do things like murder and women with my own wealth? Stark said arrogantly. How? Looking at the proud Stark in front of him, Bai Ye mocked him for being too naive. If you weren't my friend, you wouldn't have my protection. No matter how much money you have, if one of my other friends takes a fancy to your woman and wants to sleep with her, what can you do? No one can refuse Bai Ye's friendship, Bai Ye said slowly. You may not use my friendship privileges, but you can't be without them. Chapter 115 Setting Traps for Each Other. At this moment, Bai Ye was openly displaying the cruelty of the world to Stark. If you're my friend, I don't care what crimes you commit, as long as you don't provoke me, I won't bother. But if you're not my friend, and my other friends cause trouble for you, I won't just ignore it, I might even help them beat you up if you fight back. As for you saying this is a crime? What nonsense. What crime? My friends wouldn't commit crimes, they're just too young and naive. Killing for fun. After I kill you, I'll talk to them privately. They're so immature, so choose, Bai Ye said earnestly, looking at Stark. Do you want to offend me, or gain my friendship? Remember, you only have one chance. If you don't choose me, I'll go find Obama to sleep with your secretary, a threat, a blatant threat. Faced with Bai Ye's gentle smile, Stark gritted his teeth and said, I agree, very good, you made the right choice. Bai Ye smiled and nodded, temporarily setting aside the idea of having Professor X forcibly control Stark. Having agreed, Stark seemed to have suddenly lost his pride, slowly saying, what should I do next? What to do? Of course, immediately contact that all-knowing and all-powerful fortune teller in the group. Next, you repeat what he said, and I'll say a sentence, and you send it back, Bai Ye said. Stark nodded and repeated the all-knowing and all-powerful fortune teller's private message. Hello, Welcome to the chat group smiling emoji. If newcomers have any questions, feel free to ask me. I am the administrator of this chat group, smiling. By the way, if you tell me your birth date, age, and past experiences, I can deduce your future path. As Stark repeated the message, Bai Ye raised an eyebrow. So, it was using fortune-telling as an excuse to find out what stage the other person was in. Can this administrator really predict my future? Stark looked up and asked. He's nothing but a nobody. He's just spouting nonsense after watching a few movies, reading a few novels, and watching a few comics. Bai Ye sneered. What do you mean? Stark asked, puzzled. Your world, your past, are nothing more than a Marvel comic or movie in his eyes, Bai Ye explained. How is that possible? Stark said incredulously. What's impossible about that? The universe itself is finite, but the number of universes is infinite. Anything can be born from universes infinitely more infinite than infinity. You should know the theory of monkeys typing Shakespeare. Even without infinity, with Graham's repeated attempts, there's bound to be a group of monkeys who can type out every famous book on Earth in the order it appeared. As long as the probability isn't zero, it's 100% in the face of infinity. Faced with the exhaustive search of infinite universes, what's wrong with you or me appearing as characters in a novel or comic book? Hearing Bai Ye's theory, Stark instantly understood and felt much better. Then, realizing something, he looked at Bai Ye and said, so how did you know the administrator's world has my comic? Because I've also read your comic. Bai Ye didn't hide anything and said directly, that's why he's wary of me, afraid I'll expose his tricks, although at first I even considered playing along. So what's my plot in the comic? Stark asked. Following the normal trajectory, without too much interference, you'll become a superhero, fighting evil everywhere, marrying your female assistant, and ultimately dying while fighting alien invaders. However, if you keep rambling, your next storyline will become an adult plot where you die, and your uncle and female assistant get together and play cards in your funeral hall, Bai Ye urged. Meanwhile, in another post-apocalyptic world, the administrator leaned back on the sofa, looking at Stark who hadn't replied to messages for a long time, growing increasingly anxious. Could he really have been captured and taken to Afghanistan? Tony Stark, hello, I was just kidnapped by armed men in Afghanistan, and only now have I had time to check this chat group. Replied, he really is in Afghanistan. The administrator's expression changed. Omniscient and omnipotent immortal, it's alright. Judging from your situation, you're in a very bad predicament. If you encounter any trouble, you can ask me for help. Tony Stark, not necessary for now. I already have a plan to break out. I'm going to build a small arc reactor based on the materials they gave me to power the Iron Man armor. In reality, Stark looked at Bai Ye and asked, didn't you say you were going to lure him over? Why are you suddenly talking about building the arc reactor? What's the rush? You need to maintain your rebellious persona. Don't let him become suspicious. Who trusts a stranger so easily right away? Let him hang around for a few days and lower his guard, Bai Ye said calmly. In the private chat interface, the administrator nodded as he looked at the message. Sure enough, just like the Tony Stark he remembered, he wouldn't easily back down. But no rush. Let him hang around for a month. When Ethan is on the verge of death according to the plot, he'll have plenty of time to beg for help. Omniscient and omnipotent immortal, it's good that you have a plan. Since that's the case, I won't interfere with your actions. Bai Ye said, for the next few days, use building the reactor as an excuse to only read the group chat and not participate in the discussions. 10 days from now, wait for me here at this location. 10 days from now. Stark was stunned, not expecting Bai Ye to take so long to fish. Before that, whatever you want to do, I won't interfere, Bai Ye said calmly, then turned and walked outside. Hey, you're just leaving like that? Why don't you take me back to New York while you're at it? Stark called out to Bai Ye as he walked away. Go back yourself. I'm going to visit a friend near the Himalayas in Nepal, Bai Ye said, then soared into the sky with a bang and disappeared from Stark's sight. The Himalayas. Stark was taken aback. Bai Ye immediately flew towards the main Himalayan mountain range in Nepal amidst a deafening roar. Afghanistan wasn't far from Nepal, and since he was here, Bai Ye naturally wanted to make a trip to Kamartaj. He had always been curious about the Ancient One's attitude towards him. But just as Bai Ye took off, a huge halo radiating orange sparks appeared before him. On the other side of the halo, a bald woman with a gentle smile sat quietly on a bench, watching him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 The Ancient One's Gu Yi. The Ancient One, high above, under a clear blue sky, floated an orange-yellow ring of sparks before Bai Ye. Through the ring, Bai Ye could see a completely different scene inside, a wooden pavilion, complete with tables, chairs, teacups, and a teapot. The Ancient One sat leisurely in a chair, looking at him with a kind gaze. That look is disgusting. Feeling uncomfortable under her gaze, Bai Ye shuddered. Without hesitation, Bai Ye stepped into the air, walking towards the ring. She used her slingshot to pick me up before I even arrived. Such precognitive abilities. Sure enough, she sensed my presence long ago, Bai Ye thought to himself. But I wonder how much she knows about me. Her interface? Her chat group? This is the troublesome thing about dealing with time manipulation users. I wonder how many times she's already rewound me, thinking of Doctor Strange seeing 14 million futures in a short time using the Time Stone during Avengers, Infinity War. Bai Ye felt a sense of unease. Through the aperture, Bai Ye casually sat down in the chair opposite the Ancient One. On the table were a full set of teacups and a teapot. Picking up the teapot, Bai Ye poured himself a cup and asked, "How much do you know now?" "Only a small but crucial part," the Ancient One said. "After choosing you, out of respect, I won't observe the future multiple times just to gather information." Just as I thought, Bai Ye understood. The current option wasn't bad. It seemed he would have to shoulder the responsibility of Doctor Strange from the original story. "No problem. I won't ask why you chose me. After all, I'm exceptionally talented. It's only natural you chose me," Bai Ye said, and the Ancient One nodded in agreement. "I have a few more questions," Bai Ye said. "First, how much do you know about my constitution?" This was Bai Ye's main purpose in coming to Kamartaj, to use the Ancient One's time manipulation abilities to directly deduce the upper limit of his constitution. "Just as you guessed, with a physique that grows infinitely stronger, even death won't stop the pace of growth," Ancient One said. "However, your most important task right now is to maintain the balance of your body's various parameters. At your rate of growth, if you blindly increase any single attribute, the end result will be that your body shatters the moment you throw a punch." Bai Ye's expression shifted slightly. What Ancient One said was indeed correct. He was already experiencing an imbalance in his attributes. "Then, regarding my second question, you should also know about the attribute panel and the chat group, right?" Bai Ye asked. Ancient One nodded slowly, saying, "Although I've heard you mention it from your counterparts in other timelines, it's proven that this is something only you in this timeline can possess." Bai Ye pondered. "You mean, the attribute panel and chat group are unique to the multiverse?" Ancient One nodded. "That's right. No matter how the timeline split, this panel and chat group are forever bound to you. My observations of the future don't reveal any future where you have an attribute panel. In the infinite number of universes containing Bai Ye's past and future, this attribute panel can be considered your identity document. Perhaps only you, possessing this attribute panel, can truly be considered the most Bai Ye, and the others are merely your incarnations. I am the most special one." Bai Ye looked at the panel in his vision and murmured to himself, a slight smile quickly appearing on his lips. "That's how it should be. Possessing all of this, I am naturally the most special and the most powerful me. You should be familiar with the structure of our world," the Ancient One said, smiling at the boy before her. "In our world, the past, present, and future exist simultaneously, and now, with your attribute panel, your growth rate within the same time frame is the fastest in all universes." Hey, this feels like you're trying to flatter me," Bai Ye said, suppressing a smirk. "Let me tell you, I don't fall for that. And how do you know so much? Doesn't your time stone only show everything within your own timeline?" "Because I recently came into contact with a space stone as well," the Ancient One said, raising her hand to reveal a deep blue cube floating in her palm. "Through the time and space stones, I can contact myself and other universes who also possess these two stones. It's like a unique chat group." "Wow, the Ancient One's even using the space stone." Bai Ye's lips twitched slightly. "What kind of chaotic timeline is this? After communicating with myself in other universes, we've made a few guesses about your attribute panel," the Ancient One said seriously. "If it's as we predicted, then your attribute panel is terrifying." "What guesses?" Bai Ye asked. First of all, have you ever died? The Ancient One asked. Of course not, at least not in this universe. Bai Ye rolled his eyes and downed his tea in one gulp. According to you, when your attributes increase, your state will refresh to its optimal state, something others without a stat panel can't do. Any injury or pain that damages you can increase your various attributes. Simply put, you can achieve attribute increases by repeatedly torturing yourself. Then what would happen if one day your health bar exceeded your experience points? The Ancient One asked. Bai Ye fell silent at the Ancient One's words. What she meant was easy to understand. Since increasing attributes require torturing oneself, these two values could be quantified. For example, when Bai Ye's health was 11,000, losing 1 million health points would increase his attributes by 0.1. Because Bai Ye's healing ability could continuously restore health, he could repeatedly get injured, reducing his 11,000 health to 1,000 and then restoring it to full. Repeating this 100 times would increase his attributes by 0.1. What if, someday in the future, Bai Ye's health reaches 100 million, and he only needs 90 million experience points to increase his attributes? For example, in battle, Bai Ye's opponent is overwhelmingly stronger than him, so he unleashes a combo attack dealing 2 billion damage. He'll then find that when this attack reduces Bai Ye's health to 10 million, Bai Ye's experience points are completely filled by the damage, instantly increasing his attributes by 0.1. And after Bai Ye's attributes increase by 0.1, he also gains a status refresh, instantly restoring his health from 10 million to full and raising his maximum to 200 million, while his strength also increases. In other words, the opponent will face an enemy that is forever unkillable and infinitely stronger? Chapter 117 A Born Strong Man. Probably not, Bai Ye said hesitantly, startled by his own guess. If all this were true, it would be just as the Ancient One had said, terrifyingly abnormal. A monster that was immortal and grew stronger with each battle could probably only be dealt with through sealing. Really not, the Ancient One's smile was somewhat eerie, causing Bai Ye to silently shake his head. He remembered his unused attribute points. Everything increased by these points wasn't categorized under his basic attributes. The unused attribute points increased his health bar, but his basic experience bar remained unchanged. Perhaps one day in the future, he really could achieve the terrifying state the Ancient One had described. Want to hear my second discovery? The Ancient One said. Bai Ye nodded slightly, remaining silent. This isn't speculation, but a confirmed fact, Ancient One said. Your talent for infinite growth continues even in death, and the final result is that even after you die, your attributes continue to increase, whether it's death, sealing, a shift in the timeline, or attribute weakening. All of these cause you harm, and when the damage accumulates to a certain level, the experience bar on your attribute panel fills up, and then you're resurrected in a stronger form after your status refreshes. The final consequence is that even those who kill you will become stronger. Ancient One spoke while his gaze remained fixed on Bai Ye. This man before him could be sealed, killed, and his memories erased, but these were only temporary. With his constitution, the opponent might stumble due to temporary setbacks, but the victor at the finish line would always be him. This was predetermined from the beginning, regardless of his own wishes. This was a born powerhouse. I understand what you mean. Bai Ye took a deep breath and said, I've gained a lot from this trip. After speaking, Bai Ye slowly stood up and nodded gently to the person in front of him, saying, Send me back to New York not learning my magic anymore. Gu Ye smiled. Let's deal with that administrator in 10 days. For now, let's train. Bai Ye waved his hand, and the next moment a circle of light leading to New York appeared in front of him. Watching the young man in front of him walk into the circle of light and disappear, Mordo walked in from outside and asked, Master, someone came by just now. Gu Ye nodded slightly and said, A somewhat restless soul. He's fine in every way, just too impatient, so I calmed him down a bit. Above New York, Bai Ye returned from Kamartaj, looked at the night sky above him, took a deep breath, and shook his head. Although this trip to Kamartaj was only a short while, it had been of great help to him. Since arriving in this world, he had indeed felt a strange sense of anxiety. After all, anyone would be anxious and want to become stronger in a place like Marvel, which is full of crises and events. It was under this inexplicable pressure that he had pushed himself so hard for more than 2 months. But then, the Ancient One told him, It's okay, don't worry, you're invincible. Even if you do nothing and die recklessly, you'll be passively resurrected in a stronger state after a while. In short, What Bai Ye felt during this period was that his channel category wasn't the extreme style, but the damn invincible style. Suddenly, I felt completely relaxed. Bai Ye smiled with relief, looking at the river below, and suddenly relaxed his body, letting his body fall from the sky and then crash into the water in free fall. Amidst the huge splash, Bai Ye's body sank into the water. He suddenly wanted to lie down for a while. Feeling his body sinking little by little to the bottom of the river, every muscle in Bai Ye's body completely stopped exerting force, and even his breathing completely stopped. Watching the fish thrashing about in disarray, startled by the disturbance, he slowly closed his eyes and, in a state of serene tranquility, drifted into sleep. His mind had never felt so at ease. Now free from his obsessions, Bai Ye lay on the riverbed, thinking of nothing. Late that night, Susan, feeling unwell, returned to Bai Ye's villa. Camilla opened the door and said, "Come in." Nodding, Susan followed Camilla into the villa. "Where's Bai Ye?" "I don't know. Who knows where he's off gallivanting?" Camilla rolled her eyes. "He said he went to Afghanistan, then to the Himalayas, and now he's completely out of contact. Anyway, you're not getting any fun tonight." Who got any fun?" Susan blushed. She had come out of necessity. "You better be." Camilla smiled indifferently. The night passed, and Bai Ye, as Camilla had predicted, did not return. At 6 in the morning, in the silent depths of the riverbed, Bai Ye's eyes snapped open. He sat up, feeling a surge of exhilaration. With a light leap, Bai Ye sprang to the surface. To the astonishment of those around him, his inner energy surged, evaporating the water clinging to his clothes and hair. "Camilla," Bai Ye pulled out his phone. "Yeah, I had something to do last night and didn't come back. I'll be away for the next 10 days, Kingpin. Do as I said before. I'm going to disappear for a while to train. Mary, tell Smith I'll give you all some time off. I'm going to go out and train for a while, Eric." Taking out his phone, Bai Ye dialed each number, making sure they wouldn't cause trouble during his absence. After doing all this, Bai Ye's body completely entered a state of ethereal transformation, passing directly through the earth and sinking deeper into its core. 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters. As he plummeted, the surrounding pressure steadily increased. Upon reaching a certain depth, Bai Ye instantly solidified his body. As his body solidified, the soil that had overlapped with his body was sucked into the ethereal space. In an instant, Bai Ye felt thousands of tons of pressure enveloping his body, pressing evenly down on every part. His arms and thighs were alright, but areas like his eyes and eardrums were instantly squeezed inward by the immense pressure. "Just a little more, my body hasn't reached its limit yet," Bai Ye thought silently, then reached out and painstakingly dug downwards. Although Gu Ye had said he was invincible, he still had a fierce battle with the chat group administrator in 10 days. He would use these 10 days to work harder and try to increase his physique 4 or 5 times. After all, according to the chat group's assessment, he had only just reached level 4, roughly the same strength as the group leader. If he couldn't win and the administrator escaped, it would be ridiculous. Chapter 118 Breaking Through the Ground. Deep underground, in this barren wasteland where no one lives, even without penetrating the Earth's crust, the pressure released could easily crush an iron ball into a flat disk. Yet, amidst this immense pressure, a naked youth walked nonchalantly. Before him, rocks thousands of degrees hot, nearly molten, clung to his fair, rosy skin, unable to burn him. Instead, they were forced aside little by his forward movement. As he progressed, the cracks he passed behind quickly filled with rock and soil. Continuing to advance underground, Bai Ye's physique was improving at a frenzied pace. With intense training, he easily surpassed his previous day's level each day. Day 1. Day 3. Day 5. Day 10. 6,000 tons. 10,000 tons. 20,000 tons. 50,000 tons. During this continuous journey, Bai Ye needed to descend deeper every so often to maintain a relative balance between the pressure and his increased physical strength. 10 days passed slowly. Stretching his body gently, Bai Ye slowly opened his eyes, which had remained closed throughout. 10 days are almost up. With this thought, Bai Ye stopped and looked at the panel in front of him. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/50 million. Strength, 4.4 plus 0.4, 4, 2, 4, 8. Strength 50,000 tons. Movement speed Mach 7. Constitution, 4.4 plus 0.4, 4, 2, 4, 8 Purple Cloud Divine Art 3.0 version cultivation speed. 50 strands of internal energy per second, currently possessing 5,700 years of internal energy, spirit. 4.4 plus 0.4, 4, 1, 4, 8, charm. 1.4 plus unused attribute points. 0.2. The improvement in physical attributes over these 10 days is much greater than I expected, Bai Ye thought to himself. He had originally estimated an improvement of 4 or 5 times, but it had increased tenfold. And this tenfold increase was the result of him forcibly suppressing his level. To wait for his mental and physical condition to improve, he deliberately slowed down his training intensity, otherwise, his strength attribute could have increased by another 40 or 50 times. Although all 3 attributes could be increased infinitely, they weren't sequential. In this increasingly rapid increase, if one attribute slipped ahead, even by a tiny bit, the difference between the attributes could widen by hundreds or even thousands of times by the time the situation became apparent. Everyone would be running, but the one who started a second earlier would fall further and further behind, with no chance of ever catching up. But, with these attributes, I should be able to beat that group leader, right? Looking at his status bar, Bai Ye felt a bit overwhelmed. Maybe I should train for another 10 days and increase my attributes tenfold. 500,000 tons shouldn't be a problem, right? After all, the chance to fish was only once. At this moment, Bai Ye's level in the chat group was still only 4. It would be a real shame if the group leader got away. After hesitating for a moment, Bai Ye gave up. At worst, he could just have Guyu tie up the guy and deal with him himself. Besides, he still had attribute points to use. If all else failed, he could ask Shenlan to add them. Adding 0.2 attribute points to strength would more than double his power, which would be sufficient. With that thought, Bai Ye's body instantly entered the ethereal space, his right leg slamming against the solid spatial barrier. Amidst a deafening roar, Bai Ye's body moved with incredible speed, like a long, thin white line stretching hundreds of meters, smashing through molten lava and rocks as he leaped towards the ground. Meanwhile, inside the base in Afghanistan, Stark, who had flown in from New York a day in advance, waited anxiously. Wasn't it supposed to be 10 days? Why hasn't he arrived yet? Stark thought anxiously. And there hasn't been any news in these 10 days. Have I been stood up? During his 10 days in New York, he specifically used Jarvis to thoroughly investigate all of Bai Ye's intelligence before finally understanding Bai Ye's actions. This guy was a young man who had been involved in organized crime since childhood and was deeply influenced by gangster thinking. Thinking about the massive witch hunt that had swept the internet these past few days because of Bai Ye, Stark didn't know how to comment. Of course, the so-called witch hunt wasn't the kind of online attack on Bai Ye. Rather, it was Bai Ye ordering Kingpin's men to indiscriminately hunt down those who attacked him, essentially turning against the Heavenly Gang. Now, the entire internet was silent about Bai Ye, because if you attack Bai Ye, his fanatical fans would attack you. The most terrifying thing was that this witch hunt initiated by Bai Ye wasn't limited to the United States. They could also attack people across borders, from Downing Street in England to the Vatican Cathedral. Everywhere there were photos of those who had been targeted. Everyone knew that Bai Ye was behind it, but there was no evidence to prove it, because the lower classes lacked the power, and the upper classes were unwilling. At least until the second version of Bai Ye's Everyone Has Merit training is released, even if Bai Ye kills the US president, those in power will protect him to the death. Really, Stark wanted to sigh, but then he felt the ground beneath his feet begin to tremble slightly. What's going on? Stark felt as if a magnitude 6 earthquake had struck. The tremors from the earth shaking were extremely strong. The water glass on the table beside him also began to vibrate slightly, and then large cracks began to appear on the ground. The cracks spread rapidly, climbing from the concrete floor to the walls, and then the entire room was shaking violently, constantly showering dust. With a violent shaking, everyone in the entire military base was drawn to the tremor, and the sirens, indicating danger, sounded throughout the base. Suddenly, the shaking stopped, and the violently trembling ground returned to calm, as if everything had returned to normal. Just as Stark breathed a sigh of relief, a calm voice came from behind him. 100 years of internal energy, not bad. Looks like you spent a lot of money, huh? Stark was startled and turned around to see Bai Ye, now dressed normally, standing there looking at him. Did you make a sound when you appeared? Sound? I think you should have heard it just now, Bai Ye said calmly. What sound? Stark started to say something, But when he saw bottomless pit next to Bai Ye, he suddenly froze and said, "Wait, you didn't cause that earthquake, did you? If I didn't hurry, I'd be late, so I jumped a little faster." Bai Ye stared at the wall clock that had fallen to the ground due to the tremor and said, "My timing was perfect, I wasn't late, I was even half a minute early, you really did cause it." "Do you know how dangerous that was?" Stark grimaced. "The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Afghanistan and the United States are at opposite ends of the earth. Did this guy somehow dig his way from the United States?" "But I slowed down at the last minute," Bai Ye said, shrugging. "Otherwise, this entire building beneath your feet would be ready to explode." Chapter 119 My first intimate encounter with the administrator. Inside the U.S. airbase in Afghanistan, buildings were cracked and trembling. Bai Ye looked at Stark and said, "According to the plan, you were supposed to remain silent in the group these past few days, but you've been a bit too active." Stark felt a little guilty after Bai Ye's comment. Without constraints, he could restrain himself for the first few days, but in the following days he couldn't control his nature and started bragging in the chat group, even changing his real name to Playboy. Although he hadn't revealed anything crucial, the entire chat group knew that he was the character from the comic book Kamishima Kano had read, Iron Man, Tony Stark. "You should be glad you didn't expose yourself," Bai Ye said, glancing at him lightly. "Now, start asking the chat group for help. What's the excuse? Just say that your Iron Man suit was discovered, but the Afghan soldiers didn't choose to kill you. Instead, they wanted to kill that doctor named Ethan as a show of force. Then you go and ask the group member named Crimson for help," Bai Ye said slowly. "Crimson?" Stark was taken aback. "Isn't that the admin called Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal?" Having spent so many days in the chat group, he had come to find Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal's pretentious behavior somewhat comical, given his preconceived notions. He's the admin's alternate account in the group. And to maintain his high-class image, that admin never travels to other worlds, he always uses Crimson's name, Bai Ye explained. "First, ask the admin for help in the group. He definitely won't agree. Then that guy called Crimson will definitely jump out, and you just have to agree." As Bai Ye spoke, his inner energy enveloped Stark, lifting him up and flying him away. "Where are you taking me?" Stark asked, bewildered by being suddenly taken away. "In the middle of the desert, 2 level 4 warriors at full power. This base you're standing on won't last long. Of course, I don't mind if they get killed by the aftershocks of my battle," Bai Ye said calmly. This reason immediately silenced Stark. He had carefully studied the group over the past few days. The difference between each level was enormous. The so-called level 4 monster is one whose full force attack could at least crush a building. He had indeed overlooked the consequences of fighting here. Meanwhile, Stark's comments in the chat group immediately drew the attention of all the members. "Playboy, help. Someone please help." At Omniscient Sage at Crimson at Dark Blue, Gentleman's Sword, "What happened, Kamishima Kana? Is there trouble at the base that kidnapped you?" "Playboy, that's right. My Iron Man suit plane has been exposed. Now those terrorists are surrounding me, and they're going to kill my assistant Ethan to threaten me." "Playboy, at Omniscient Sage at Crimson at Dark Blue, please help. Ethan is dying." Seeing Stark's plea for help in the chat group, Omniscient Sage smiled smugly. Just as he had predicted, Stark with the chat group was definitely more arrogant than in the original story. Without pressure, he would definitely slip up and reveal his true colors. "Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal, I'm stationed in the Great Thousand Worlds in the Primordial Era, unable to be in 2 places at once, so I can't leave. This is troublesome, Crimson. It's alright, the administrator has a great responsibility. For the sake of the group members, I can't shirk my duty. I'll come." "Playboy, great. Please come as soon as possible. Ethan has a gun to his head. After this is resolved, I'll treat you to a meal, in jail." Above the vast yellow sands of Afghanistan, Bai Ye looked at Stark and said, "Once you've fished them out, quickly send out the teleportation invitation. Just invite one person, group member." Playboy sent a cross-realm request to the group members. Number of people: 0/1. As the invitation was sent, Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal, also known as Crimson, smiled slightly. It was just a few terrorists, he was already making a fool of himself. The next moment, Crimson gently tapped the invitation in the chat group. The space in front of him instantly changed, and what came into view was a vast expanse of yellow sand, and 2 people. A handsome young man with a full head of black hair flowing in the wind and a somewhat unrestrained smile stood before him. The other was a middle-aged man with a small mustache and a vibrant demeanor. Where are the Afghan terrorists? Where is Ethan? Looking at the two before him, the previously confident, omniscient and omnipotent immortal sensed something amiss. I've heard so much about you, omniscient and omnipotent immortal, Bai Ye said, placing a hand on Stark's shoulder. Activating his intangibility ability, Stark was instantly pulled into an intangible space by Bai Ye, preventing him from being caught in the crossfire. Seeing this, the omniscient and omnipotent immortal thought to himself, "Oh no, I've fallen for your trap." Before he could react, Bai Ye was already close to him, his right hand at his waist, thrusting forward with a sudden, forceful punch. It was a simple, straightforward straight punch, something any boxer with 2 or 3 years of training could deliver. But when this punch was delivered with tons as the base unit of force and Mach as the multiplier, it would crush everything in its path. Faced with this supersonic punch, the administrator could only raise his arms to block, a crimson light instantly enveloping his entire body. As the crimson light covered him, red scales emerged from his skin wherever it passed. At the moment of their collision, it was as if a giant dragon roared, and hundreds of tons of yellow sand rose into the sky from the two of them, engulfing the scenery. In just a moment, Crimson felt his arms go numb, and could only dissipate the force, shooting out in the direction of White Knight's fist, carving a trench over 100 meters long in the sand. "Huh. You couldn't even kill me with a sneak attack, not so great." Looking at the handsome young man whose hair was flying wildly in the yellow sand and whose sleeve was about to burst open, the administrator, furious at being caught off guard, laughed inwardly. "Think you can get away with this with your petty tricks? Let me tell you, you're dreaming. No matter who you are, you and that Tony Stark are going to die today." The administrator trash-talked, his fingers growing incredibly long and thin, the tips sharp as knives, capable of easily leaving marks on diamond. But then, he realized his trash-talking seemed to have an effect. The boy in front of him had become angry, his fists clenched tightly. "You even had to deflect my probing punch. Do you know how much I wasted 10 days of my pleasure on trash like you?" As the words fell, in Crimson's contracting pupils, in an instant, a power 10 times stronger than before erupted from the boy's body. Even though the two were hundreds of meters apart, a strong sense of danger filled Crimson's mind. Looking at the boy, dozens or even hundreds of times more terrifying than before, Crimson seemed to hallucinate hearing the roar of the entire Earth. Or perhaps, this wasn't a hallucination at all? Chapter 120 Crushing. Chat Group Rules. Cross-Dimensional Invitation Guide. Please remember the following rules. Rule 2. Any group member can use cross-dimensional invitations, but only non-mute members can send invitations. Rule 1. The inviter for cross-dimensional invitations must set the time, location, and number of members before arrival. Rule 4. After crossing dimensions, simply click Cancel Cross-Dimensional Invitation to return to your original world after 10 seconds. Rule 5. You cannot return to your original world through the chat group while in combat. Combat status is objectively determined by the chat group and refreshed 3 minutes after disengaging from combat. The above are the rules for new members joining the chat group, which anyone can view. To retaliate, Bai Ye thoroughly read all the rules of the group and mentally simulated various possible scenarios before making his move. Most importantly, the administrator must be captured alive. Torture aside, at least a mute must be lifted first. Otherwise, if the administrator dies and a new administrator cannot be generated within the group, who will lift Bai Ye's mute? To achieve this, mere equal strength was far from sufficient. To ensure absolute success, he cautiously decided to call in reinforcements. On the surface, it was only a battle between him and the administrator, but in reality, it was just like the 16-6 Jia, 5 directions GD, 4 duty officers, and 18 Dharma protectors secretly protecting Tang Sanzang on his journey to the west. Secretly, the Ancient One, Magneto, Professor X, and others were all monitoring the situation. If Bai Ye lost and embarrassed himself, they would join forces to give the administrator a righteous beating. Meanwhile, in Bai Ye's illusory space, Stark stared in astonishment at the massive hydrogen bomb within, wondering where Bai Ye had obtained it. Was he planning to perish together with the enemy? Of course, as it turned out, all of Bai Ye's preparations were unnecessary. Bai Ye, who had always considered the administrator a major hypothetical enemy, discovered that this person was far too weak. Did he really deserve to keep him thinking about this for so long? Roar. 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 At this moment, within the yellow sands of Afghanistan, it was as if 10,000 dragons roared, with tens of millions of tons of sand and gravel shooting into the sky. Even the sunlight was blocked by the sandstorm, and the normally bright sunshine seemed as dark as dusk. As the core of this upheaval, Bai Ye's clothes were now completely turned to dust, and his arm slammed towards Shen Hong with a terrifying force of tens of thousands of tons. Each punch sent tens of thousands of tons of sand and gravel flying around him. Every second, he could unleash thousands of straight punches in his most powerful form. At the same time, his terrifying physique of 4.8 allowed him to maintain this full force state indefinitely and tirelessly, forcing himself to raise his physical fitness to 4.9. At the very center of this chaos, Shen Hong, whose skin was phosphated, looked incredulously at the massive sandstorm that had been unleashed. The sandstorm was like a tornado, blotting out the sky and tilting the heavens and earth, while the atmosphere at its core was so fiercely churning that it could grind iron into dust. The sand and gravel swirling wildly in the wind pelted Crimson's skin, producing a constant clanging sound like bullets hitting steel plates. What kind of monster is this? Crimson stared at the humanoid calamity shrouded in the yellow sand, his heart filled with terror. But before he could wallow in self-pity for long, a pale left hand pierced through the swirling sand and grabbed the administrator's crystalline hair. "You are dead." The brief statement vanished into the wind, and along with the swirling sand, Crimson's heart stopped beating. Then, in the sandstorm, Bai Ye, gripping Crimson's wire-like hair, thrust his right fist straight towards his abdomen. Boom! There was no flesh-on-flesh impact, no fist-to-flesh collision. In Crimson's despairing gaze, Bai Ye's right fist stopped precisely 1 centimeter from his abdomen. Although the fist stopped, the environmental effects caused by the punch did not disappear. In an instant, a terrifying shockwave, visible to the naked eye, surged towards Crimson's abdomen, carrying yellow sand. As kinetic energy was converted into heat, each grain of sand was heated to thousands of degrees Celsius, piercing through the opponent's scale-like skin with a shockwave of air. Cough. In an instant, intense pain surged into Crimson's brain, melting his thoughts, and a mouthful of bright red blood spurted from his mouth. Was I still a little too close? Bai Ye frowned slightly. This guy was terrifyingly weak, making him afraid that he would blow him apart if he used too much force. Then I'll be gentler, Bai Ye decided in his heart, grabbing the opponent's head and forcefully exerting force with his right hand. The crushing force made his fingers dig into Crimson's flesh, forcibly cracking the opponent's skull, and with his head still in his grasp, Bai Ye threw it out quickly and forcefully. In that instant, Crimson roared in pain, feeling as if his neck was about to be torn off. Then his body flew out at supersonic speed like a javelin, large shards of sand striking his skin, peeling off his scales bit by bit, a painful experience akin to being sliced into 1,000 pieces. But halfway through, a slender hand gently pressed against him, twisting his head and delivering a knee strike. It stopped him almost instantly, but the powerful wind pressure still tore his crimson face apart. "This is worse than death," Crimson howled. His heart trembled with pain, but his powerful self-healing ability allowed his injured body to heal continuously. Enduring the damage, he only wanted to die as soon as possible. At this moment, less than 5 seconds had passed since Bai Ye unleashed his full power. Half an hour later, Bai Ye emerged from the gradually subsiding sandstorm, carrying the seemingly mentally unstable, dead dog-like administrator in his right hand. "Because of this damn idiot, I wasted 10 days of my time." Bai Ye, his face full of displeasure, gripped Crimson's scalp-less skull, dragging his body across the rough sand. Once out of the sandstorm's epicenter, Bai Ye released Crimson and then lightly snapped his fingers. The next moment, Crimson gasped, scrambling to his feet. "You went too far," he said. "Too far? I was just letting him experience the pain I've endured these past 2 months, Bai Ye replied non-committally. "While my mind is connected to him, his pain is also transmitted to me," Professor X, sitting atop the brainwave amplifier in Utopia, said, trembling. Only now did he realize that Bai Ye's pain was greater than his own. "Hurry up and control his consciousness to unmute my chat group," Bai Ye urged. Crimson, his face contorted in pain, nodded. A few seconds later, a mechanical voice rose in his mind. "You have been unmuted in the chat group." "Finally over," Bai Ye said with a satisfied smile. Chapter 121 The Death of the Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal. Hearing the message that the chat group had been unbanned, Bai Ye finally couldn't help but smile. His efforts over the past 2 months hadn't been in vain. Professor X, After the chat group end was lifted, quickly sealed Crimson's consciousness away from his body, it was just too painful. Gently opening the chat group, as proof of his official return, Bai Ye thought for a moment and then casually sent an ellipsis. The entire chat group immediately vibrated. Deep Blue, Kimijimakana, Gentleman's Sword, Playboy, you've lifted the ban, so hurry up and release me. I'm still in this space. Do you know how stressful it is to be with a hydrogen bomb? In Japan, Kimijimakana, wrapped in a sheet, sat up abruptly in bed when Deep Blue, who had been missing for so long, suddenly sent a message. She blinked in surprise. What's going on? Deep Blue, who's been lurking for so long, replied. And what's this about Uncle Stark lifting the ban? Wasn't he kidnapped by Afghan militants? Deep Blue, I was banned by the administrator before, so I couldn't speak, but now it's okay. I've almost killed the administrator, so I can speak again. Deep Blue posted a picture. Looking at the picture of a miserable man lying on the ground like a dead dog, barely breathing, everyone in the group was stunned. Especially those who didn't know the truth. They just thought, isn't this Senior Crimson? How could it be the administrator? Deep Blue, Crimson is just the alternate account of the omniscient and omnipotent immortal. The two are actually the same. Stark and I are in the same world, so I set up a scheme to cripple him. Deep Blue, a gentleman's sword, your purple cloud divine skill is very useful to me. If you have any problems in the future, come to me, I will definitely help you if I can. Bai Ye sent the message while releasing Stark from the illusory space. Finally out, Stark breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at the administrator on the ground. Even just looking at him made him shudder with pain all over his body. What are you going to do with him? Stark asked, pointing at the omniscient and omnipotent immortal. I'm considering it, Bai Ye pondered carefully. Killing him like this would be too easy on him, but if I don't kill him, he'll keep occupying the administrator position. Administrators can't choose to transfer their positions, so I'm not sure if a new administrator will be elected after an administrator dies. As Bai Ye spoke, he finally sighed. He got off too easily. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Ye took a step forward and easily crushed the skull of the omniscient and omnipotent immortal, who was now in a vegetative state. His entire head exploded instantly. In just a moment, the avatars of the omniscient and omnipotent immortal and Crimson in the chat group immediately went dark, and the messages showed that they were not online, like funeral portraits. In Bai Ye's mind, the mechanical voice of the chat group also rang. Member, Crimson, offline member, omniscient and omnipotent immortal, offline, officially cancelled his administrator position, and will be automatically transferred to member, Deep Blue, according to the order of strength level. Deep Blue, promoted to administrator of All Heavens chat group. The chat group, which had been almost silent for several months, underwent a series of dramatic changes the moment Bai Ye logged on. Seeing the messages popping up one after another, all the group members sensed that the chat group would change because of Bai Ye's arrival. From then on, the second-generation leader of the chat group began to take over and manage the group. Seeing the outcome developing in the best direction he had predicted, Bai Ye nodded in satisfaction. However, he also knew that this chat group was not as easy and pleasant as it seemed on the surface. Because of his illegitimate rise to power, coupled with the chat group's notifications, every member now knew that as long as you were the strongest in the group and killed the original administrator, you could inherit the position according to strength. If new powerful members joined in the future, he might not be so safe. Haha, will the instigator have no descendants? Bai Ye laughed indifferently. And as everything was confirmed, in the void, the Ancient One's portal slowly closed, as if it had never existed. What are you going to do next? Stark asked, looking at the dust in the distance, guessing the scene of the battle in his mind. Go back to New York, and then take a vacation, Bai Ye said, and the next moment he turned into a white line and disappeared without a trace. Hey, you brought me here, aren't you going to take me back? Even just taking me to the base would be fine, Stark shouted at the empty sky, watching Bai Ye disappear. After waiting a while, seeing that Bai Ye was really using him as a disposable tool, Stark could only complain. Then, he channeled his inner energy, found his direction, and ran towards the Air Force Base. Meanwhile, in the Daily Bugle's office, Editor-in-Chief James looked at the news before him, his expression extremely conflicted. Are you sure what you're saying is true? James asked. Of course, the informant nodded. Our biological laboratory has just concluded that people who haven't cultivated inner energy cannot have meridians. That means our bodies have been completely and silently modified by that Bai Ye. This is absolutely first-hand information, and more people will soon discover it. It can't be hidden anymore. If you don't publish this headline, you'll miss out. Faced with the informant's persuasion, James sat in his chair, pondering whether to reveal this information. After all, Bai Ye was not someone to be trifled with. After much deliberation, James gritted his teeth and nodded, "Go to the finance department and get the money. Your intelligence was very valuable. I'll look forward to cooperating again." Watching the intelligence agent's departing figure, James took a deep breath and said, "Everyone, we have work to do." Tomorrow's breaking news headline is in the bag. As the intelligence seller left the Daily Bugle, a satisfied smile appeared on his face as he rubbed the banknotes in his hand, and he strode towards the next newspaper office, preparing to make his money off of several sources. Under the cover of night, Bai Ye returned to New York after an hour's journey. Gently opening the front door, he saw Camilla wrapped in a blanket, resting on the sofa. Hearing the sound of the door open, Camilla's bright eyes lifted slightly. As she expected, her little mistress had returned. "Is the matter settled?" Camilla asked. "Of course, now I'm relieved," Bai Ye said, taking steps closer to Camilla, ready to make up for what he had missed during this time. Camilla rolled her eyes at the man who had just returned and was already preparing to play poker, but her body, which had already taken the form of White Knight, was ready in advance. Chapter 122 Achievements in Life. Early morning, in a villa district in downtown New York City. Bai Ye lay sprawled on the soft bed, his body shaped like the Chinese character for wood, with Camilla fast asleep beside him. He had originally planned to fight Camilla for 3 days and 3 nights, but unfortunately, the vampire's spirit was too fragile. His consciousness had already become somewhat sluggish in less than a night. "This feels like being unemployed," Bai Ye thought to himself, resting his hands behind his head, lounging leisurely. Before, his motivation was to become stronger, survive in the Marvel Universe, and eventually find an opportunity to repay the all-knowing, all-powerful chat group master. Now, his strength had increased many times over. The Ancient One had said that even if he died, he could be resurrected, and the master had been personally crushed by him yesterday. In just over 2 months, it felt like he had already completed the game of life, achieving everything he was born with. Now, he felt every cell in his body was slacking off. He suddenly had no motivation. "Perhaps I should find something to do," Bai Ye thought, staring at the ceiling. "Let me think about what my goals are. What do ordinary people pursue again? Power, money, and beauty. But I have all of those." Bai Ye felt a little bored. Now that he was in the Marvel world, power flowed over him, money was plentiful, and as for beauty, he could just have it whenever he wanted. Then let's go to an extreme and take all 3 to the extreme. First, power. Now that we have chat groups, how about creating an empire that spans countless worlds and ruling over all life? Then, money. Under heaven, all land belongs to the king, all people within the realm are his subjects. Tax everyone in the empire, and nationalize all wealth beyond what is needed for daily life. Finally, beauty. Like collecting stamps, build a huge harem and collect all the beautiful women he knows who fit his fantasies through seduction, hypnosis, coercion, and threats. No, I've already established an empire. Why force anything? I'll just order all women within the empire with a beauty rating of 1.3 or higher to remain virgins for life, and I, as the emperor, will have the right to their first night. Bai Ye thought to himself and suddenly chuckled, because he realized that he actually had a chance to achieve things that ordinary people could only dream of. Forget it, I'll give the world a chance and not mess with it. Bai Ye rolled over, abandoning his grand plans, and summoned the chat group in his mind. Now that the former administrator was dead, he, as the new strongest member, had taken over the chat group. Looking at the level 1 label above the chat group, Bai Ye knew that this represented the chat group's level. The higher the level, the more members could join, and the greater the probability of joining higher level members. To upgrade from level 1 to level 2, the chat group needed at least 3 level 2 members. If there weren't enough, it might even drop a level. The original chat group had 2 members, Bai Ye and the omniscient immortal, both above level 2. Now that the immortal is dead, only Bai Ye remains. Looking at the chat group's limit of 20 members, now there are only 6. Bai Ye opened the new member list and browsed it. The list was full of random people, names he'd never heard of, and their levels were mostly around level 0. But thinking about it, it made sense. The myriad worlds were endless, and the probability of randomly encountering a character from the story was extremely low. Knowing all the members was actually a low-probability event. While browsing the list, Bai Ye got up and gently pulled back the curtains. The warm sunlight streamed in, illuminating the room. On the bed, the blankets draped over Camilla's alluring curves. Feeling the sunlight, she opened her eyes and glared at Bai Ye, saying, "Don't you know I'm a vampire? Anyway, you're already immune to sunlight," Bai Ye replied. Previously, Camilla had been absorbing his blood daily. Nourished by his blood, considered a rare treasure, her strength had exploded, and her body had developed immunity to sunlight, allowing her to run and jump in the sun without sunscreen. She was only uncomfortable because of her vampire nature. While basking in the sunlight, Bai Ye slowly walked to the corner of the next room, took out a box of game cartridges, and connected them to the screen to Camilla's astonishment. "What are you doing?" Camilla's expression was like seeing an elephant locked in a refrigerator. "Playing games, isn't it obvious?" Bai Ye gestured to the controller in his hand. "Where did you hide, Bai Ye?" Camilla exclaimed in shock. "Aren't you going to train today? Even going to kiss Gwen would be fine, but you're spending your time playing games. Is there really such a big difference between not training and before?" Bai Ye waved his hand helplessly. "And I might not train at all in the future." "Why?" Camilla's eyes widened, her beautiful eyes bulging. "No reason. Why bother training if I don't want to? Simply put, I'm bored," Bai Ye said, distractedly playing a game with a controller. "I used to train to get stronger, but now I'm invincible. I can get stronger just by lying down, so why bother training?" Bai Ye said. He hadn't done anything all night, at most playing cards with Camilla. When he woke up this morning, he found that his strength had increased by about 3%. Obviously, his physical abilities had started to improve, and the increase in strength would only increase more and more. Even if he did nothing, and the rate of increase in strength remained the same, his strength would increase by nearly 50,000 times in a year. By the time Thanos came in 10 years, he would be 46 times stronger. What's the point of training then? Give Earth a chance. "What I need to do now is love myself," Bai Ye said, looking at Camilla. "Come sit here with me." Seeing Bai Ye's focus stayed on the game, Camilla knew he was serious, so she could only get up and walk over, picking up the controller to play games with him. Just as she sat down, Bai Ye patted her shoulder and said, "Wrong seat. Sit on my lap, it'll be more stable with a plug-in." Camilla, instantly understanding Bai Ye's wicked intentions, rolled her eyes and said, "Then how will I be able to play the game?" Bai Ye said righteously, "This is for your training. Last night you couldn't even last 3 hours, that's really lame. When you can play the game without getting red in the face or out of breath, with a blank expression, that's when you've successfully trained." Camilla, pulling down her pants and sitting obediently, said, "You make a lot of sense. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels." Chapter 123 Ubuquin's Sorrow. Inside the cabin, Bai Ye and Camilla, her face flushed, nestled together, controlling their game characters. Although they were playing together, it was essentially Bai Ye dominating the game. Because of Bai Ye's control, Camilla's own character couldn't contribute any fighting power, requiring Bai Ye to spare some attention to protect her. Fortunately, thanks to his exceptional reflexes, Bai Ye could achieve a perfect rampage even alone. Watching his character easily clear several levels, routed and overwhelmed by his attacks, Bai Ye's phone rang beside him. "Answer it for me," Bai Ye said to Camilla, whose breath was sweet. She nodded with difficulty, then reached out her delicate hand to take the phone, swiped it, and held it to Bai Ye's ear. Controlling the controller with one hand and covering Camilla's lips with the other to prevent her from making a sound, Bai Ye slowly said, "Kingpin, what's up, Mr. Bai, did you see the news this morning?" Kingpin asked on the other end of the line. Bai Ye asked, "News? What news? Does it have anything to do with me?" "Yes, it's about your everyone has the skill to cultivate thing," Kingpin said. "Everyone has the skill to cultivate? Right, did Congress pass that tax policy from before?" Bai Ye suddenly remembered this and asked. Kingpin said with difficulty, "It was passed originally, but now there might be a change." "Oh," Bai Ye's eyes narrowed, feeling like something had been stolen from him. "Tell me what happened." "This morning, major newspapers all issued news saying that our books are poisonous. that the human body originally doesn't have meridians, and that only after reading everyone has the skill to cultivate will such things appear, and that they have been unknowingly altered by you, Kingpin slowly explained, which greatly surprised Bai Ye. Even he didn't know about this. When he first started cultivating the purple cloud divine skill, because he was too weak, he didn't feel his body being modified and didn't notice this aspect at all, so he only had suspicions. Now, after hearing Kingpin's description, Bai Ye suddenly understood. I was wondering how Marvel people could possibly have meridians that perfectly match Yu Buquan's martial arts world. It turns out it's because this knowledge became a meme after the chat group. Simply put, if Bai Ye hadn't accessed Yu Buquan's Xixia divine skill through the chat group, this world wouldn't be able to generate internal energy even in 1,000,000 years. Without the chat group's intermediary, people in the Marvel world simply couldn't have planned meridians within their bodies. So, now those outside are having complaints. Bai Ye smiled, his guess about the outside reaction pretty accurate. Yes, because our actions a few days ago were a bit excessive, this incident has led to a backlash, and now the outside world has a lot of complaints about us, Kingpin said. Moreover, the tax bill that was already passed might be cancelled, Kingpin said. So, my $100 billion might be going down the drain, Bai Ye said calmly, making Kingpin on the other end of the phone barely dare to breathe. Those people think it's too much, Bai Ye said nonchalantly, then let's go even further. Dare to resist? I have plenty of strength and means. Yes, 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 Kingpin nodded repeatedly, then said, so what do you plan to do? Don't make a fuss, I'm thinking. Bai Ye was a little annoyed. He had clearly been kind enough not to want those people dead, but they still wanted to rob him of his money. Of course, money didn't matter to Bai Ye now, but being taken advantage of was very unpleasant. After hanging up Kingpin's call, Camilla whispered in Bai Ye's ear, my little master, how do you plan to take revenge on them? You're wrong about one thing. Bai Ye placed his arm on Camilla's shoulder, gently pressing down to make the booth more secure. Turning his head to look at the girl with seductive eyes, he smiled and corrected her, it's not revenge on those in the same position, but punishment on those in a lower position, just like what I'm doing to you now. Bai Ye smiled, pressed the controller, and sped up the game's progress. Controlling his game character, wielding a long spear, he fought his way through countless levels, finally facing the final boss, the Flower Beast, after half an hour, and blasting its heart apart with a single shot. Meanwhile, in the chat group, after a day, the members had become accustomed to the change of administrators. According to Stark in the group, the all-knowing and all-powerful immortal was a fraud, his so-called fortune-telling was nothing more than a facade, using the existence of similar creations in his world to charlatan. Now, Bai Ye shared his latest discovery in the group. In the Republic of China era, Uncle Nine stared in astonishment at the administrator's comments, never expecting that his ability to cultivate internal energy was due to this. Will the talisman-making method I upload also work like this? Uncle Nine pondered. In the group chat, Yu Buquan stared in utter astonishment at Bai Ye's description, shocked that his internal energy could be used in this way, to have someone else transfer power to him? No one had ever thought of this before. However, upon closer reflection, it did seem to make sense. In this era where even easily copied and passed down martial arts manuals were being treasured and gradually becoming extinct, no one would choose to pass on internal energy, something painstakingly cultivated. Especially since different martial arts resulted in vastly different internal energies, few techniques could resolve the issue of different types of true energy, and rashly passing on internal energy could be life-threatening. However, Yu Buquan stroked his mustache, thinking of his empty groin, and a wave of sorrow washed over him. If he had known he would obtain a chat group, he wouldn't have needed to castrate himself. Now he even had an interest in cosmetics, and his feminization was severe. But looking at the level 4 Deep Blue in the group, a glimmer of hope rose in Yu Buquan's heart again. You have a message waiting to be checked. Bai Ye heard the mechanical voice of the chat group, opened it, and saw that Yu Buquan was sending him a message via private chat. Gentleman Sword, I presume that Senior Deep Blue, like the previous administrator, is aware of my fate. You must know all about my unspeakable private matters, Gentleman Sword. To be honest, in my impulsive act of practicing the evil-slaying sword technique for the sake of Huishan's revitalization, I became impotent. Now, I am filled with sorrow and wish to ask if you, Senior, have any remedies. Deep Blue, no problem, wait a moment, I have a solution. A moment later, a voice rang in everyone's ears in the chat group. Administrator, Deep Blue, has uploaded the group file. Everyone has Merit Practice 3.0 version. Please check it. Chapter 124 Parasite. Everyone can practice version 3.0. At this moment, everyone in the chat group was drawn to this notification. Bai, filled with excitement, opened the chat group and quickly downloaded the group file to browse it. All martial arts under heaven take the cultivation of Ki as their foundation. Righteous Ki is a gift from heaven, but ordinary people do not cultivate it properly, instead letting their temper overwhelm it. The problem with martial artists lies in their violent and arrogant nature. Looking at the first paragraph of the document's general outline, Bai fell silent. Isn't this my purple cloud divine skill? But soon, with patience, he continued reading and discovered that, apart from the first paragraph, the later sections deviated more and more from the original content. Especially the final explanation of martial arts by Bai Ye, which could easily simulate all martial arts under heaven and amplify them with supreme internal energy. Whether it was the most masculine or the most yin, it could be easily simulated with just a slight modification to the internal energy's flow. When the time comes, health preservation can be simulated with the eternal youth and longevity technique, aptitude can be improved with the Yi Jin Jing, combat with the Tai Zhuan Jing, healing with the Shen Sao Jing, and rapid mastery with a Bai Ming divine skill. The more Bai watched, the more he was shocked by its exquisite details. This was actually based on the Xixia divine skill, modified into such a profound divine skill, simulating all kinds of martial arts. Upon completion, one could enjoy a lifespan of 500 years, immortality, and strength approaching level 3. Especially the simulation part of the Shen Sao Jing, which could bring the dead back to life and heal the wounded, easily restoring his manhood. I'm saved, Bai thought excitedly. Gentleman Sword, thank you, Senior Shenlin, for passing on the technique. If you need anything in the future, I'll go through fire and water for you. Ghost Catcher, thank you, Senior Shenlin, for passing on the technique. Master Luo, me too, Deep Blue, it doesn't matter, you guys can practice this set for fun first. My strength is lacking right now, I can revise it later when I have time. Practice it for fun first? My strength is lacking? I can revise it later when I have time. Kimishima Kana's lips twitched slightly. She felt that this senior was too versatile. One sentence could easily find 3 points to criticize. If level 4 strength was considered lacking, then what about her, who had been practicing the purple cloud divine art for several months and had only barely reached level 1? It was really too discouraging. Kimishima Kana suddenly thought, wait, senior only joined the group a month later than me. At that time, his level was still 0. As a result, he jumped 1 level every 10 days or so. Will he continue to jump like this? But this seems not bad. Senior Deep Blue is a nice person and speaks very casually, Kimishima Kana thought to herself. Although it was a bit impolite, compared to the omniscient and omnipotent immortal who had collapsed midway, the girl still felt that this new administrator was much more generous. In the hands of the omniscient master, the chat group was truly just a chat group. Aside from fortune-telling, he was stingy, and the only extraordinary martial arts technique he possessed, the purple cloud divine skill, was contributed by Bai. The body of 41-year-old Sakagami Kohai was found in a car in a paid parking lot in Kawasaki City, Kanagawa Prefecture. The body showed signs of being eaten, and currently, at that moment, on the television in front of Kimishima Kana, a news anchor was reading from a script, quickly catching the girl's attention. Is it a parasite? Kimishima Kana subconsciously tightened her coat, feeling a chill run down her spine. She had previously learned the plot from the omniscient master that she would be killed by a parasite that would fall from the sky, devour human brains, and live in their place. Thinking of the parasite's near level 2 abilities as described by the omniscient master, the girl felt a chill. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore. With a technique modified by Senior Deep Blue, I'll reach level 2 soon too, Kimishima Kana thought firmly. Browsing through the constant stream of thank you messages in the chat group, Bai Ye remained calm. He didn't bother with the affectations he'd shown before, like the great immortal before, he'd say whatever he wanted, after all, he had nothing to pretend about. These group members were people he'd be spending a lot of time with, and as an administrator, he didn't have the authority to kick anyone out. Since that was the case, if they were cooperative, he might as well give them a little something. Of course, if any of them were truly righteous in their folly, then so be it. Facing the midday sun, Bai Ye stood up and stretched. As his body, stronger than steel, relaxed, he prepared to go for a walk. Inside the Doom Group, Victor anxiously watched the continuously plummeting stock price, feeling that betting on Bai Ye had been a terrible mistake. Since the rumors of internal energy problems surfaced, his company's stock price had crashed, though compared to Kingpin's value, it had fallen less. Watching the stock price plummet, Victor felt frustrated, but considering Bai Ye and Kingpin's methods, he could only grit his teeth and bear it, because they didn't care about the law. Below, Susan looked at the boy sitting at a nearby table, a lollipop in his mouth, with surprise. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Just hanging out, and didn't you say you'd teach me about space exploration?" Bai Ye said, looking around. "You're here to learn." Susan glared at Bai Ye, her face flushed. Johnny, ever observant, walked up to Bai Ye and said with a forced smile, "Hello, brother-in-law, I was being rude before. Please be kind to me in the future." "What are you talking about?" "What brother-in-law?" Susan glared at Johnny, looking incredibly embarrassed. As for Bai Ye, he nodded calmly, neither rejecting nor denying Johnny's statement, which still relieved Johnny. "By the way, when will the space equipment go into space?" Bai Ye asked. "About a week from now. According to calculations, the space storm will pass by Earth around that time, just in time to obtain complete experimental data," Susan said thoughtfully. Bai Ye nodded without comment. Since returning from the Ancient One, the space storm was now something insignificant to him. However, since it had already been planned, going to space once wouldn't hurt. He had never been to outer space before anyway, so he could treat it as an experience. "Hasn't Dr. Reed returned yet?" Bai Ye suddenly asked. "Why are you so concerned about him?" Susan was puzzled, finding Bai Ye's attitude towards Reed rather unusual. "It's just my concern for a genius. If I can't find him, so be it." Bai Ye shook his head. "Where did you put the space data?" "I'll take some time to look at it later. You guys continue with your work." At Bai Ye's command, the astronaut's code of conduct and the spacecraft's instruction manual were quickly piled up in front of him. Chapter 125 The Chat Group Gathering. In the White House, President Ellis rested his right hand on a stack of documents, looking at Vice President Rodriguez. "The matter of internal energy is causing quite a stir right now. The research experiments have been confirmed. What do you think we should do about Bai Ye?" "You mean the genetic alteration?" "I think it's great," Rodriguez smiled. "In terms of increased life expectancy, there's nothing wrong with it. Every year our budget allocates a large amount to healthcare for our citizens. Now, with internal energy, they won't even get sick, which is like saving a huge amount of money. However, the retirement age should also be extended by several decades." Rodriguez, in his 40s or 50s, had a face that, while somewhat aged, now had a rosy complexion and was full of vitality. After 10 years of internal energy conditioning, he seemed to have experienced a second spring. But Bai Ye has gone too far. Many people below him have complaints. "If we continue to ignore it, it might affect the next election," Ellis said with difficulty. Hearing Ellis's words, Rodriguez's expression changed slightly. "You haven't already done anything, have you? Don't forget Bai Ye's personality. Don't let blood splatter on me later." "Don't worry, I won't do anything." Ellis shook her head, but Rodriguez understood the implication. Doing nothing, neither supporting nor opposing, allowed his subordinates to act independently, leaving him, as president, completely uninvolved. There was still some time before the next presidential election. He could let his subordinates cause trouble and wait for the underworld and Bai Ye to settle things. He could then place his bets closer to the final result. "Who do you think will win in the end?" Ellis asked with an unwavering expression, like a fisherman sitting alone on a fishing platform. "Bai Ye. Those who are waiting for their lifespans to be extended won't let him fail. They just aren't openly supporting him right now, like us," Rodriguez pondered. "At least until Bai Ye's value is fully exploited, these people won't let him die." "I think so too. So for now, as long as we direct the public's anger towards Bai Ye, we can stay out of it," Ellis said with a confident smile. "No matter how arrogant Bai Ye is, he can't possibly attack the government, can he? We have no grudge against him. Can we, as spectators, be shot to death? As for the ordinary people who are killed or injured by Bai Ye, those are necessary sacrifices, helpless choices, and growing pains of development. It's not our fault." Ellis spread her hands. "After all, we didn't make them confront Bai Ye, won't attack the government." Rodriguez felt a little uneasy, as if he had overlooked something. With his unease, his gaze fell on a page of a document titled Hearing on Victims and Internal Force of Bai Ye's Fanatical Fans. "What is this?" Rodriguez asked, looking down at the document in confusion. "Oh, the hearing for Bai Ye, huh? But as you know, we recently heard from Kingpin that Bai Ye suddenly disappeared for a while, so the summons for this hearing probably won't reach him." Ellis laughed. "It's just a bunch of people talking nonsense, no one will take it seriously." Rodriguez nodded slightly, but felt his unease growing stronger, and decided to do something. At the Doom Corporation, Susan, Johnny, and others got to work, while Bai Ye sat idly browsing aerospace data to pass the time. Just then, Kingpin called. "Mr. Bai. The Vice President asked me to give you his regards," Kingpin said. "Vice President?" That Rodriguez, hearing this title, Bai Ye immediately remembered who Kingpin was talking about. "That old bastard. Why would he be so friendly to me if he hasn't done anything wrong?" The Vice President said that the recent public opinion is somewhat unfavorable to you, and he hopes you can be a little more patient. "He says that the higher-ups are all on your side," Kingpin said. "Pretty filial, huh? To put it bluntly, I support you, but I won't show it," Bai Ye chuckled, his ear pressed to the phone. While answering the call, Bai Ye also spared some attention for the chat group Deep Blue. "Add all members, I'm planning a party. Anyone want to come?" A party? Everyone in the group was stunned. Was this going to be an offline meetup? However, they weren't too opposed to Bai Ye's invitation, especially since he had just uploaded a cultivation technique. They'd go even if it was just to give him face gentleman's sword. "Senior Deep Blue, your kindness is immense. I will certainly attend, Master Luo." "Of course, no problem. Call me, Old Luo, whenever you come." "Kamijimakana, okay, Senior." Soon, one by one, the group members flooded the chat with messages saying they were ready. Seeing this, Bai Ye pondered for a moment before saying to Kingpin on the other end of the phone, "I need to invite a few friends to a party tomorrow night. Can you help me with the arrangements?" "A party? Of course, no problem. I guarantee it will be a complete success," Kingpin assured him, while simultaneously preparing with utmost care. On Mount Hue, Yu-Buquan looked at Deep Blue's invitation in the group chat and began racking his brains, thinking about what gift to present when they met, hoping to leave a good impression on his senior. After all, Bai Ye had done him such a big favor, and it was only right and proper to express his gratitude. But soon he saw Deep Blue's message in the group chat. "Deep Blue, it's just a simple gathering, a casual get-together is fine. No need to make it so grand. You don't need to send any gifts. I'm very rich, I don't need your little bit. I'll send the invitation in the group chat, and you can just click accept." "What a rich guy's statement," Kamishimakana commented, feeling a little curious about this very wealthy Senior Deep Blue, wondering how he compared to Stark from the same world. In the world of Mr. Zombie, Lin Jiu silently gazed at his dilapidated mortuary, filled with envy. He could only mutter to himself, "Money is just an external thing, I'll have it eventually, soon." A day passed in the blink of an eye. After arriving at the venue prepared by Kingpin, Bai Ye sent a cross-dimensional invitation to the group chat. "Deep Blue, everyone, get ready and accept my invitation." Group member, Deep Blue, sent a cross-dimensional request to the chat group. 05 people were present. Almost the instant Bai Ye sent the invitation, Yu-Buquan and the others, who had been waiting for a long time, pressed the accept option. The space before them instantly shifted, jumping directly from their own world to this location. Meanwhile, in New York City, in front of the Empire State Building, where the hearing was being held, the first meeting recently to criticize Bai Ye, reporters were broadcasting footage from cameras. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.